Jonah Miles stood in the marble foyer of a decaying mansion, holding a crumpled newspaper ad that promised salvation or madness. He wasn't sure which. The woman before him, draped in designer black like a beautiful corpse, asked only one question. "Can you drive without asking where we're going?" He should have said no, should have walked away. But when you're 3 days from homelessness and your daughter hasn't spoken since her mother died, you don't ask questions. You just say yes. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you how a job nobody wanted became the thing that saved them all. The eviction notice had been taped to Jonah Miles' apartment door for 3 days before he finally pulled it down. Not because he'd found a solution, but because 7-year-old Harper kept staring at it with those hollow eyes that had become her default expression since Emma died. The red letters screamed "Final Notice" loud enough that even the neighbors had stopped making eye contact with him in the hallway. Jonah crumpled the paper and shoved it into his jacket pocket, right next to the shut-off warning from the electric company and a medical bill that had gone to collections. 14 months ago, he'd been a middle school history teacher with a modest savings account and a wife who made their cramped 2-bedroom feel like a palace. Now he was a widower who'd burned through everything: the savings, the life insurance that barely covered the funeral, the goodwill of friends who'd eventually stopped calling. Cancer didn't care about your plans. It didn't care that Emma had been only 32, or that Harper needed her mother, or that Jonah had no idea how to braid hair or explain why Mommy's chair at dinner stayed empty. It just took and took until there was nothing left but debt and silence. "Daddy?" Harper's voice was so quiet he almost missed it. She stood in the doorway of the living room. No, not the living room anymore. Just a room with a sagging couch and boxes he couldn't afford to move. Her dark curls, so much like Emma's, hung in tangles he kept meaning to brush. Her fingers clutched a drawing she'd made on the back of an unpaid bill. "Yeah, baby?" She held up the picture. It was their apartment building, but the walls were cracking, splitting apart like a broken heart. Black scribbles covered the windows. Jonah's chest tightened. Harper hadn't drawn anything in weeks. Before that, it had been colorful pictures of butterflies and rainbows, the kind of art that covered their refrigerator when Emma was alive. This was different. This was what lived inside his daughter's head now. That's really good, Harper." His voice cracked. "Really good." She didn't smile, didn't respond, just turned and walked back to her room, and Jonah heard the soft click of her door closing. Not slamming. Harper didn't slam doors anymore, didn't throw tantrums or laugh too loud or do anything that required energy she'd lost somewhere between the hospital and the funeral. The silence that followed felt like drowning. Jonah pulled out his phone, screen cracked, bill overdue, and scrolled through job listings he'd already applied to a dozen times. Warehouse worker, night janitor, retail associate. All of them had rejected him or never responded. He was overqualified for some, underqualified for others, and for the rest, he just couldn't compete with candidates who didn't have to leave early for school pickups or call in sick when their kid had nightmares so bad she threw up. He was about to close the browser when an ad at the bottom of the page caught his eye. Not a website listing. Someone had photographed an actual newspaper classified and uploaded it to a job form. Private driver needed immediate hire, excellent pay, flexible hours, serious inquiries only, estate in Newport, Rhode Island. Contact Arthur Pemberton, 401-550147. That was it. No company name, no requirements listed, no mention of experience or references. Just a phone number and an address that, when Jonah looked it up, showed a sprawling property on Ocean Drive, the same stretch of coastline where Gilded Age mansions sat like monuments to old money. The comments below the post were a mix of mockery and warnings. Probably a scam. Sounds like the setup to a horror movie. Called the number. Some British guy answered and said they'd had 0 applicants in 3 weeks. Weird vibes. I passed. My cousin drove past that estate, said it looks haunted. Jonah stared at the number. Every instinct told him it was a bad idea. Desperate people made stupid decisions, and he was desperate enough to be dangerous to himself. But Harper's drawing flashed through his mind, their building splitting apart, darkness filling the windows. In 5 days, that drawing would become reality. The sheriff would come. They'd be escorted out. And then what? A shelter? His car, which barely ran? He couldn't do that to her, not after everything she'd already lost. His thumb hovered over the call button. Just a conversation, he told himself. Nothing committed. Just information. He pressed dial. The phone rang twice before a crisp, formal voice answered. Locke Estate, Arthur Pemberton speaking. The accent was distinctly British, the kind Jonah associated with BBC dramas Emma used to watch. Refined, old world, completely out of place in a Craigslist job listing. Hi, I'm calling about the driver position? Ah. There was a pause, the sound of paper shuffling. You're the first call we've received in 4 days. May I have your name? Jonah. Jonah Miles. Mr. Miles. Do you have a valid driver's license and clean driving record? Yes. Can you begin immediately? Yes, but I have a daughter, 7 years old. I'd need flexibility for school schedules. Another pause. Jonah braced himself for the polite rejection. Instead, that won't be a problem. Mrs. Locke's schedule is quite regular. 4 stops daily, Monday through Friday. Weekends off. The position includes housing if needed. Jonah's heart hammered. Housing? The guest cottage on the property. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished. It hasn't been used in some years, but it's structurally sound. Arthur's tone was matter-of-fact, as if offering a house with a job was perfectly normal. Mrs. Locke values privacy and reliability above all else. If you can provide both, the arrangement will be mutually beneficial. I don't understand. Why hasn't anyone taken this job? Because, Arthur said carefully, Mrs. Locke is particular. She requires a driver who won't ask questions, who will arrive on time, drive where instructed, and respect her silence. Many people find the terms unsettling. Unsettling how? I'm afraid you'll need to discuss that with Mrs. Locke directly. Can you come for an interview today? Say 3 o'clock? Jonah glanced at the clock. It was barely 10 in the morning. I can be there. Excellent. Drive through the main gates and follow the path to the house. I'll be waiting. The line went dead. Jonah stood in his soon-to-be former apartment, gripping his phone like a lifeline. Every rational part of his brain screamed that this was suspicious, that normal jobs didn't come with free housing and vague warnings about unsettling terms. But the eviction notice in his pocket felt heavier than his doubts. He knocked on Harper's door. Baby, we're going for a drive. The GPS took them up Route 138, across the Newport Bridge, and onto Ocean Drive, where the Atlantic crashed against rocky cliffs and mansions rose like fortresses against the sky. Harper sat in the back seat, earbuds in, staring out the window at nothing. She'd stopped listening to music weeks ago, just wore the earbuds as armor against the world. Jonah's 2007 Honda Civic rattled as it climbed the coastal road. The estates here were the kind he'd seen in documentaries. Gilded Age palaces built by Vanderbilts and Astors, symbols of an era when wealth was so vast, it built summer homes with ballrooms and servants' quarters. The GPS announced, "You have arrived." Jonah slowed, then stopped in front of massive iron gates that looked like they belonged to a European castle. A bronze plaque read, Locke Estate, private property. Beyond the gates, a stone driveway curved up a hill, disappearing into overgrown trees. He rolled down his window and pressed the call button on the intercom. Static crackled, then, "Mr. Miles?" "Yes." The gates groaned open with the sound of metal that hadn't moved in a long time. Jonah drove through slowly, and Harper pulled out her earbuds, suddenly alert. The driveway wound through what must have once been manicured gardens, but now looked like nature reclaiming its territory. Ivy strangled marble statues. Fountains sat dry and cracked. Trees pressed close on both sides, their branches forming a tunnel that blocked out the afternoon sun. Then the house came into view, and Jonah's breath caught. It wasn't a mansion, it was a Gothic cathedral masquerading as a home. 3 stories of dark stone, with towers that clawed at the sky and windows like watchful eyes. Gargoyles perched on the corners of the roof. The whole structure sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, waves crashing hundreds of feet below. "Daddy," Harper whispered, "it looks like a castle." "Yeah," Jonah murmured, "it really does." He parked in the circular driveway next to a fountain where stone angels wept into empty basins. Before he could even unbuckle, the massive front door opened and a man descended the steps. Arthur Pemberton looked exactly like his voice sounded. 60-something, silver-haired, wearing an actual three-piece suit like he'd stepped out of the 1920s. His posture was military straight, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Miles," Arthur extended a hand. "Welcome to Locke Estate." Jonah shook it. The man's grip was firm, his palm rough, working hands despite the formal appearance. Arthur's gaze shifted to Harper, who'd climbed out of the car and was staring up at the house with something almost like curiosity. It was the most emotion Jonah had seen from her in weeks. And who might this young lady be? "My daughter, Harper." "A pleasure, Miss Harper." Arthur gave a small, formal bow, and the corner of Harper's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "I hope you'll find the estate less intimidating than it appears. Much of what looks frightening is simply old." "Is it haunted?" Harper asked, her voice tiny but clear. Arthur considered the question seriously. "I've worked here 15 years and never seen a ghost, but I have seen quite a lot of sadness, which some people say is the same thing." He straightened. "Mrs. Locke is waiting in the library. Miss Harper, would you like to sit in the kitchen with me while your father speaks with her? Cook made shortbread this morning." Harper looked at Jonah, who nodded. She followed Arthur without protest, and Jonah realized that his daughter, who hadn't willingly interacted with anyone in months, had just trusted a stranger. Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was Arthur's old-world formality, or maybe Harper recognized something in this strange, sad place that felt familiar. Arthur led them through doors that belonged in a museum, 12 feet tall, carved with scenes of ships and storms. Inside, the house was exactly what Jonah expected. Dark wood paneling, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, furniture that cost more than his annual teacher's salary. But there was something else, too. Dust. Not everywhere, but in corners, on bookshelves, on the chandelier overhead, as if someone cleaned only the parts they still used and let the rest slowly disappear. "Mrs. Locke doesn't entertain," Arthur said quietly, as if reading Jonah's thoughts. "She rarely leaves her private rooms except for her daily outings. What you see here is what remains of a life that stopped 15 years ago." "What happened 15 years ago?" Arthur's expression tightened. "She'll tell you if she chooses to, or she won't, and you'll understand anyway." He stopped at another set of doors. "Miss Harper, the kitchen is just down that hall. Follow the smell of butter and sugar." Harper hesitated, then walked toward the hallway. Jonah watched her go, heart aching. "She's been through something," Arthur observed. "Her mother died 14 months ago." "I see," Arthur's voice softened. "Mrs. Locke has also lost people. Perhaps they'll understand each other." He knocked twice on the library door, then opened it. "Mrs. Locke, Mr. Miles has arrived." The library was the most beautiful room Jonah had ever seen, and the saddest. Floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books, a fireplace large enough to stand in, leather chairs positioned near windows that overlooked the Atlantic. But the drapes were half closed, the fireplace cold, and most of the books looked like they hadn't been touched in years. A woman stood by the window, her back to them. "Thank you, Arthur." The butler withdrew, closing the doors behind him. Evelyn Locke didn't turn around immediately. She stood framed by weak afternoon light, a silhouette carved from stillness. When she finally faced him, Jonah understood why no one had taken this job. She was beautiful in the way ice sculptures are beautiful, perfect and untouchable, and carved by something sharp. Mid-50s, maybe, with silver-threaded black hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore a black dress that looked expensive and uncomfortable, and her eyes, steel gray and cold, swept over Jonah like he was a piece of furniture she was considering purchasing. "Mr. Miles, Mrs. Locke, you have a daughter." "Yes." "Harper, she's 7. Arthur tells me her mother is deceased." The bluntness should have offended him. Instead, it felt oddly respectful. No platitudes, no empty condolences, just acknowledgement. 14 months ago. Evelyn nodded slowly. "And you need this job because you're about to lose your home." It wasn't a question. Jonah didn't bother denying it. "Yes." "Good." He blinked. Good? Desperation makes people reliable. They don't quit over minor discomforts. She crossed to a desk and picked up a folder. I require a driver Monday through Friday. 4 stops daily. 30 minutes at each location. You'll drive a 2015 Mercedes S-Class, which is maintained by Arthur. Your cottage is a quarter-mile from the main house. Privacy for both of us. What are the stops? That, Evelyn said, meeting his eyes, is the question everyone asks, and the reason I've had 0 applicants. She opened the folder, revealing a contract. I don't explain where we go or why. You drive, you wait, you don't comment, don't ask questions, don't make conversation unless I initiate it. Those are the terms. That's it? That's it. And if I agree to these terms, you'll hire me? Today? I'll hire you right now. You can move into the cottage tomorrow. She slid the contract across the desk. $50,000 annually plus housing and health insurance. Harper may enroll in the local school district using the estate address. Arthur will coordinate the arrangements. Jonah stared at the paper. $50,000 was more than he'd made as a teacher. The health insurance alone was worth saying yes. Harper's pediatrician had been calling about overdue bills for her counseling sessions. Why? He asked. Why offer all this for a job that's just driving? Evelyn's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes, something deep and dark and drowning. Because, Mr. Miles, everyone in this world wants to fix broken people. They want to talk about it, analyze it, offer unsolicited advice and false hope. I don't want to be fixed. I want to be left alone. She picked up a pen and held it out. Can you do that? Jonah thought about Harper's drawing, their splitting apartment, the silence that had swallowed his daughter whole. He took the pen. Yes. Then sign. He did. Evelyn countersigned without ceremony, then filed the contract in her desk. You start Monday, 7:30 a.m. sharp. Arthur will show you the cottage and give you the keys to the Mercedes. Do you have questions? Just one. What do I call you? Mrs. Locke. Not Evelyn? Her jaw tightened. No one calls me Evelyn. Understood. She turned back to the window, dismissing him without another word. Jonah stood there for a moment, waiting for something, some acknowledgement that this was strange, that she was hiring a man she'd known for 5 minutes to drive her to mysterious locations without explanation. But Evelyn Locke just stared out at the Atlantic, still as a statue, and Jonah realized she'd already forgotten he was in the room. He left quietly. Arthur was waiting in the hallway with Harper, who held a paper napkin with 3 pieces of shortbread wrapped inside. Cook insisted, Arthur explained. She rarely has children to spoil. Thank you. Jonah crouched down to Harper's level. Did you say thank you? Harper nodded, then surprised him by whispering, The kitchen is warm. It was the most she'd said in weeks. Arthur's expression softened. The cottage has a similar stove, quite cozy in winter. He gestured toward a side door. Shall we? They walked through gardens that had once been magnificent. You could see it in the bones of the design, the stone pathways, and strategically placed benches. Now it was wild, beautiful in a melancholy way, like a ball gown torn and left in the rain. The cottage sat at the edge of the property, surrounded by oak trees. It was stone like the main house, but smaller, almost normal-sized, with a red door and windows with actual curtains. Arthur unlocked it. It's been cleaned and stocked with basics, linens, toiletries, some pantry staples. If you need anything else, make a list for Cook. Inside was everything Arthur had promised. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, a kitchen with that warm stove Harper had mentioned, a living room with furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive. The whole place smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh air. Harper walked straight to the smaller bedroom and stood in the doorway, taking it in. There was a bed with a white quilt, a dresser, a window overlooking the garden. Can this be mine? She asked. Yeah, baby, it's yours. She stepped inside and closed the door, not all the way, but enough for privacy. Jonah heard her moving around, exploring. Arthur handed him 3 keys, cottage, main gate, and the Mercedes. She's in the garage behind the main house. Arthur will show you Monday morning. He paused. Mrs. Locke is difficult. She doesn't mean to be unkind. She's just forgotten how to be any other way. What happened to her? Arthur's gaze drifted toward the main house, visible through the trees, that Gothic silhouette against the sky. She lost her son 15 years ago, and then her husband 3 years after that. Since then, she's been... He searched for the word. Absent, physically present but not really here. The outings you'll be driving her to, they're all she has left. The only time she leaves the estate. Where do we go? I don't know. She's never told me, and I've never asked. That's the arrangement. Arthur met his eyes. But I'll tell you this, Mr. Miles. Whatever those places are, they're killing her slowly, and I haven't been able to stop it. Before Jonah could respond, Arthur straightened, his professional mask sliding back into place. I'll leave you to settle in. Mrs. Locke takes breakfast at 7, and she expects you ready by 7:30. Don't be late. I won't be. Arthur nodded and walked back toward the house, his form slowly disappearing into the overgrown gardens. Jonah stood in his new home, because that's what this was now, wasn't it? A home. Temporary maybe, but real. He walked to Harper's door and knocked softly. Come in. She was sitting on the bed, shortbread untouched on the napkin beside her, staring out the window. But her fingers moved across the quilt in patterns, the way she used to trace Emma's hand when she was thinking. You okay? Is this place sad, Daddy? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? It feels sad, like it's been crying for a long time. Jonah sat beside her on the bed. Out the window he could see the main house through the trees, that impossible Gothic structure clinging to the cliff, surrounded by gardens that had grown wild and fountains that had run dry. Yeah, he said quietly. I think it is sad, but maybe we can help it feel a little better. Harper leaned against his shoulder, and Jonah put his arm around her. They sat like that as the afternoon light turned golden, then orange, then purple. Neither of them spoke, but for the first time since Emma died, the silence felt less like drowning and more like rest. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Jonah dressed in the only button-down shirt he owned and walked Harper to the main house at 7:15. Arthur met them at the kitchen door, where Cook, a round woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands, had prepared breakfast: eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and juice. The school bus stops at the main gate at 8:10, Arthur explained. I've enrolled Miss Harper in Hawthorne Elementary. They're expecting her. Harper ate quietly, methodically, the way she did everything now. Jonah wanted to say something encouraging, something fatherly and wise, but the words stuck in his throat. What did you tell a child who'd already lost everything? At 7:28, Arthur led him to the garage. The Mercedes was black, pristine, and looked like it cost more than Jonah had earned in 5 years of teaching. Arthur handed him the key fob. She doesn't like conversation before the first stop. After that, she may speak or may not. Follow her lead. Follow her. And if there's an emergency? There won't be. She's made this drive 5 days a week for 15 years without incident. Arthur checked his watch. She'll be out in 2 minutes. Wait by the rear passenger door. Jonah took his position. The morning was quiet except for the ocean's rhythm. Waves against rocks, eternal and indifferent. At exactly 7:30, the main door opened. Evelyn Locke descended the steps in the same black dress, or one identical to it. Her hair was pulled back severely. Her face was composed and blank, like a mask she'd put on along with her clothes. She didn't acknowledge Jonah as he opened the door, simply slid into the back seat and stared straight ahead. First stop, she said. The address is in the GPS. Jonah closed her door, got behind the wheel, and started the engine. The GPS displayed their destination: Rhode Island Hospital, 5983 Eddy Street, Providence. The drive took 40 minutes. Evelyn didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. She just stared out the window at the passing landscape like she was watching a movie she'd seen 1,000 times. Jonah pulled up to the hospital's main entrance. Before he could ask which department, Evelyn spoke. 30 minutes. Wait here. She got out and walked into the hospital without looking back. Jonah sat in the idling Mercedes, watching people come and go. Families with balloons visiting new babies, elderly couples moving slowly, medical staff in scrubs grabbing coffee between shifts. Exactly 30 minutes later, Evelyn emerged. Her eyes were red. She got in the car without a word. "Second stop," she said, her voice hoarse. The GPS updated Wilson and Associates Law Office, 127 Thames Street, Newport. They drove in silence. Jonah wanted to ask if she was okay, but Arthur's warning echoed. She doesn't like conversation. The law office was in a historic building downtown. Evelyn went inside. Jonah waited. This time when she returned, her jaw was tight, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the door handle. She sat rigid in the back seat, staring at nothing. Third stop. The GPS showed a residential address in Portsmouth. When they arrived, it was just an empty lot, foundation stones and nothing else, grass growing through cracked concrete. No house, no structure, just ruins. Evelyn got out and stood at the edge of the property for 30 minutes. She didn't move, didn't cry, didn't do anything, just stood there like she'd been carved from stone herself. Jonah watched her from the car and thought about grief, how it turned people into ghosts haunting their own lives. When she returned, her face was somehow blanker than before. Fourth stop, Bank of America, Thames Street. Evelyn went inside, came out 28 minutes later, got in the car. Home. They drove back to Locke Estate in complete silence. When Jonah pulled up to the main house, Evelyn finally spoke. Same time tomorrow. Yes, Mrs. Locke. She walked inside without another word, and Jonah sat in the Mercedes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what he'd just witnessed. This wasn't a job. It was a ritual, a daily pilgrimage through grief, each stop a station of suffering, and for reasons he couldn't explain, it reminded him of Harper's silence. Different methods, same wound. He drove the Mercedes back to the garage and walked to the cottage, where Harper was already home from school, drawing at the kitchen table. But this picture was different. It showed the cottage surrounded by wild gardens, and in the corner, almost hidden, was a girl with dark curls standing in a doorway. "How was school?" he asked. Harper shrugged, then quietly, "Mrs. Locke was standing in the garden this morning. I saw her from the bus." "Yeah?" She looked like a statue, like the ones in the graveyard where Mommy is. Jonah's chest tightened. He sat down beside Harper and studied her drawing, the cottage, the garden, the lonely figure in the corner. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "people get stuck in sad places, even when they're still alive." Harper's pencil hovered over the paper. "Is that what happened to you?" The question hit like a punch, because she was right. He'd been stuck too, stuck in the hospital room where Emma took her last breath, stuck in the funeral home where they picked out a casket, stuck in that empty apartment where everything reminded him of what he'd lost. "Yeah, baby, I think it did." "Are we still stuck?" Jonah looked around the cottage, the warm stove, the clean windows, the bedroom where Harper slept without nightmares for the first time in months. Then he thought about Evelyn Locke, making her daily rounds through grief like Sisyphus pushing his boulder up a hill. "I don't know," he admitted, "but maybe we can help each other get unstuck." Harper nodded slowly and went back to her drawing. This time she added color, just a touch of green in the garden, a hint of gold in the windows. It wasn't much, but it was something. The days fell into rhythm. Monday through Friday, 7:30 sharp. 4 stops, 30 minutes each. Evelyn never varied, never explained, never spoke beyond giving directions home. But Jonah learned things anyway. The hospital was the pediatric wing where a boy named Daniel Locke had spent his last days 15 years ago. Jonah found the memorial plaque one day while waiting. In loving memory of Daniel James Locke, aged 12, who fought with courage and grace. The law office was where Evelyn still met with attorneys managing her late husband's estate and the family company, Locke Properties, a real estate empire that owned half of Newport and parts of Providence. The empty lot was where her house had stood before she ordered it demolished. Arthur had mentioned it once. She couldn't bear to see it standing empty, so she had it torn down. Said it was worse than a grave. And the bank was where she signed papers, moved money, managed assets with the mechanical precision of someone who'd turned life into transactions because transactions didn't hurt. After 2 weeks, Harper asked if she could come on the drives. It's boring, baby, just sitting in a car. I don't mind. She held up her sketchbook. I can draw. Jonah asked Arthur, who asked Evelyn, who said, to everyone's surprise, yes. So Harper joined them. She sat in the back seat beside Evelyn's silence, drawing pictures of the places they visited. The hospital's fountain, the law office's stone lions, the empty lot's foundation stones, the bank's revolving door. Evelyn never commented, never acknowledged Harper's presence. But Jonah noticed in the rearview mirror that sometimes, just sometimes, Evelyn's eyes would drift to Harper's sketchbook. And on the third week of Harper riding along, something changed. They were parked outside the hospital, waiting for Evelyn to return, when Harper spoke. Daddy, why does Mrs. Locke visit a hospital if she's not sick? Jonah chose his words carefully. Sometimes people visit places that remind them of people they miss. Like how we visit Mommy's grave? Yeah, like that. Harper was quiet for a moment, pencil moving across paper. Then, does Mrs. Locke miss someone who is sick? I think so. That's sad. It is. When Evelyn returned and got in the car, Harper did something Jonah didn't expect. She held up her drawing, a picture of the hospital surrounded by flowers, with butterflies rising from the garden. I drew this for you, Harper said, her voice small but clear. Because hospitals should have pretty things. Evelyn stared at the drawing. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. Her hands trembled in her lap. Then, so quietly Jonah almost missed it. Thank you. She took the drawing carefully, like it might shatter. And for the rest of the drive, she held it in her lap, staring at it instead of the window. That night, Arthur knocked on the cottage door. He held a package wrapped in brown paper. From Mrs. Locke, he said. For Miss Harper. Inside was a complete set of professional art supplies, pencils, charcoals, pastels, watercolors, brushes, and paper so fine it looked like silk, the kind of supplies that cost hundreds of dollars. Attached was a note in precise handwriting. Children shouldn't be punished for grieving. Harper's eyes went wide. Is this real? It's real, Jonah said, his voice thick. That night, Harper drew until midnight, pictures of the cottage, the gardens, the ocean. And in every picture, somewhere small and almost hidden, was a woman in black standing just a little closer than before. The art supplies changed something in Harper. Not overnight, grief didn't work that way, but gradually, like ice melting at the edges. She started drawing every morning before school, and Jonah would find her sketches scattered around the cottage, the oak trees, the wild roses growing along the garden walls, even Arthur carrying a silver tea tray with his perfect posture. But it was the drawings she made during their daily drives that told the real story. Each one was a gift for Evelyn, handed over with fewer words than the last, as if Harper understood that sometimes silence spoke better than speech. A picture of the law office with birds perched on the windowsills, the empty lot reimagined as a garden full of sunflowers. The bank's revolving door transformed into a kaleidoscope of colors. Evelyn accepted each one without comment, but Jonah noticed she no longer left them in the car. She carried them inside carefully, like sacred objects. 3 weeks into this new routine, on a Thursday morning thick with October fog, they arrived at the hospital to find the parking lot blocked by construction barriers. Jonah pulled over to the side, uncertain. There's construction, he said, watching Evelyn in the rearview mirror. I can drop you at the emergency entrance, or no. Her voice was sharp, then softer. Just wait. It'll clear. But 20 minutes passed, and the barriers remained. Workers in hard hats moved equipment, oblivious to the black Mercedes idling nearby. Evelyn sat rigid in the back seat, her jaw clenched, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Harper, sensing the tension, stopped drawing. Mrs. Locke? Are you okay? I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Jonah could see it in the mirror, the way her breathing had gone shallow, how her eyes fixed on the hospital entrance like a drowning person watching the shore slip away. Mrs. Locke, he said gently, we can come back tomorrow. Or later today, if I visit every weekday, every single one, for 15 years. Her voice cracked on the last word. I can't miss a day. I can't. The desperation in her tone made Jonah's chest ache. This wasn't about preference. It was compulsion, ritual elevated to survival. Harper unbuckled her seatbelt and slid across the seat until she was next to Evelyn. Without asking permission, she took one of Evelyn's trembling hands and held it between both of hers, small and warm and alive. "My mommy's in a cemetery," Harper said quietly, "and sometimes we can't visit because of snow or when Daddy was too sad to drive. But Mommy's still there. She doesn't go away just because we miss a day." Evelyn stared at Harper's hands holding hers. A tear slipped down her cheek, then another, and suddenly she was crying, not sobbing, but tears streaming silently down her face like a dam finally cracking. "His room was on the 4th floor," she whispered, "window facing east. He liked watching the sunrise." Her voice broke. "I haven't missed a single day, not one. Because if I stop, what does that mean? That I've moved on? That he doesn't matter anymore?" "It means you're still alive," Harper said with the blunt honesty only children possess. "And being alive is really hard when someone dies." Evelyn covered her face with her free hand, shoulders shaking. Jonah sat frozen in the driver's seat, watching his 7-year-old daughter hold a grieving billionaire's hand while traffic moved past them and construction workers shouted instructions, and the world continued on like nothing was breaking apart in the back of this car. Finally, Evelyn composed herself. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. No tissue, no concern for the mascara now smudged across her cheeks. She looked at Harper with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "You're very wise for 7. My daddy says grief makes you grow up too fast." "Your daddy's right." Evelyn squeezed Harper's hand once, then released it. To Jonah, "Take me home. We'll try again tomorrow." It was the first time in 15 years she'd missed a stop. That evening, Arthur appeared at the cottage with another delivery, not art supplies this time, but a leather-bound book with gilt edges. Harper opened it to find blank pages, thick and cream-colored. The note inside read, "For your drawings. The good paper makes the colors brighter." E.L. Harper traced the initials with her finger. "Daddy? I think Mrs. Locke is like us." "What do you mean?" "I think she's stuck in the sad place too, but maybe she's trying to get out." Jonah pulled his daughter close and kissed the top of her head. Out the window, through the bare trees, he could see a single light burning in the main house. Evelyn's window, the only one illuminated in that Gothic silhouette. Maybe Harper was right. Maybe they were all trying to find their way out of the dark. The next morning, Evelyn returned to her routine as if nothing had changed. But something had shifted imperceptibly, like a locked door opening just a crack. She still didn't make conversation, still maintained her rigid schedule, but occasionally, so briefly Jonah might have imagined it, her eyes would meet his in the rear-view mirror. Not speaking, just acknowledging. He was there. She saw him. It was during the second stop outside the law office that Jonah finally broke the silence rule himself. Evelyn had been inside for 40 minutes, 10 minutes longer than usual, and when she emerged, her face was ashen, her walk unsteady. She got in the car and said nothing, just stared at her hands. "Mrs. Locke?" Jonah turned in his seat. "Are you all right?" "Drive." "You're 10 minutes over. If something's wrong, I said drive." But her voice lacked its usual command. She sounded exhausted, defeated. Harper set down her pencils. "Did something bad happen?" Evelyn's laugh was bitter. Something bad happened 15 years ago. Everything since then is just echoes." Jonah made a decision that probably violated every term of his employment. He got out of the car, walked around to Evelyn's door, and opened it. "Come on." She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "What are you doing?" "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from here. We're going to sit down, and you're going to tell me what just happened in that office, because you look like you're about to break." "I don't break." "Everyone breaks, Mrs. Locke. The only question is whether you do it alone or with people who give a damn." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly she stepped out of the car. Harper scrambled after them, and the 3 of them walked to a small cafe with outdoor seating overlooking the harbor. Jonah ordered coffee. Harper got hot chocolate. Evelyn sat rigid at the metal table, watching boats drift past on the water. "They want me to sell," she said finally. "The lawyers. The board. Everyone who has an opinion about Locke Properties. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup but didn't drink. My husband built that company. When he died, I inherited it. The buildings, the developments, the strip malls, and office parks. Do you know what we're building right now, Mr. Miles? No. Luxury condominiums in Providence, 40 units, each starting at $800,000. Beautiful views, state-of-the-art amenities, everything the wealthy could want. Her voice was flat, reciting facts. Do you know what used to be there? Jonah shook his head. Family homes, modest, affordable, in a neighborhood that had been stable for 30 years. We bought them through shell companies, one by one, then claimed the land was better suited for high-density development. The city approved it because we promised jobs and tax revenue. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were hollow. 83 families displaced. Some got fair buyouts, most didn't, and I signed every single document because I was too buried in grief to pay attention to what I was doing. Harper had stopped drinking her hot chocolate, listening with the intensity children bring to adult confessions they don't fully understand but know are important. The lawyers just told me, Evelyn continued, that 3 of those families are now homeless. A single mother with 2 kids is living in her car. An elderly couple lost their home of 40 years and are in a shelter. And we, my company, my name, are responsible. You didn't know, Jonah said. I should have known. I signed the papers. I collected the profits. I let strangers run my husband's company into something he would have hated, all because I was too busy drowning to notice I was pulling other people under with me. The confession hung in the salt air between them. Seagulls cried overhead. A family walked past eating ice cream despite the autumn chill. The world continued, indifferent to revelation. So what are you going to do? Jonah asked. Evelyn's hands trembled around her coffee cup. I don't know. The development is almost complete. The families are scattered. What can I do? Buy them new houses? That doesn't undo what was done. No, Harper said suddenly, her small voice cutting through the despair. But you can stop making it worse. Both adults looked at her. She was staring at Evelyn with those 2 old eyes that had seen death and understood pain. What do you mean, sweetheart? Evelyn's voice had gentled in a way Jonah had never heard. When Mommy died, Daddy was so sad he stopped going to work. He stopped cooking, he stopped doing lots of stuff, and we lost our apartment and had no money, and everything got really bad. Harper traced patterns on the metal table with her finger. But then he took this job with you, and that didn't bring Mommy back or fix all the bad stuff that already happened. But it stopped new bad stuff from happening. Right, Daddy? Jonah's throat was tight. Right. Harper looked back at Evelyn. So you can't fix the families you already hurt, but you can stop hurting new families, can't you? The simplicity of it seemed to stun Evelyn into silence. She stared at Harper like seeing her for the first time, not as an accessory to her driver's life, but as a whole person with wisdom earned through suffering. Out of the mouths of babes, Evelyn whispered. Then louder. You're right. God help me. You're absolutely right. She stood abruptly, leaving her untouched coffee, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen as she typed. When she finished, she looked at Jonah. I just emailed my board. Emergency meeting tomorrow. We're halting all new residential displacement projects pending full review. She laughed, sharp and slightly manic. They're going to fight me. Tell me I'm emotional, irrational, letting grief cloud my judgment. Are you? Jonah asked. Probably. But maybe grief is exactly what I need to be feeling. Maybe it's better than the nothing I've been using to make decisions for 3 years. She looked out at the harbor, and something in her posture had shifted, still rigid, still controlled, but alive now, present. Daniel used to say I had a good heart buried under all the business suits. He'd be so disappointed to see what I've become. Then don't be that person anymore, Harper said matter-of-factly. Decide to be different. Evelyn crouched down until she was eye level with Harper. You know what? You're hired. I'm 7. That's illegal. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled, a real smile, small and fragile, but genuine. Then you're my unofficial consultant on matters of conscience. How's that? Does it pay? In art supplies and wisdom. Deal. They shook hands solemnly, and Jonah watched this strange moment, his daughter negotiating with a billionaire over moral guidance, and thought about all the ways grief reshaped people. How it could turn you into a ghost or force you back into life. How sometimes the only way out of your own suffering was to stop causing it in others. They finished their drinks in comfortable silence, then returned to the Mercedes. But when Jonah asked for the third destination, Evelyn said something that broke 15 years of rigid pattern. Let's skip the lot today. I don't think I can bear standing on that foundation again. Where would you like to go instead? She was quiet for a long moment, watching the harbor disappear behind them as they drove. Then, the beach. I haven't been to the beach since my son died. He loved the water. Jonah drove to Easton's beach, nearly empty on a weekday morning in late October. They walked down to the sand, Harper running ahead to chase waves, Evelyn and Jonah following slowly. Why did you really take this job? Evelyn asked. You could have found something less strange. Because strange paid enough to keep my daughter fed and housed. And because sometimes strange is exactly what you need when everything normal has fallen apart. Desperation makes people honest. It does. They watched Harper crouch to examine shells, her hair whipping in the wind. The ocean was gray-green and restless, waves collapsing into foam. I had a nanny, Evelyn said quietly. After Daniel got sick, I hired someone to take care of him when I couldn't bear to do it myself. When he was in the hospital, when he was dying, I kept working, kept signing papers and attending meetings. Anything to not sit in that room and watch him disappear. She wrapped her arms around herself. The last thing he said to me was, Mommy, don't be scared. I was holding his hand and he was comforting me. A 12-year-old boy dying of leukemia, and he was worried about me. Jonah didn't know what to say to that. What could anyone say? I've been visiting that hospital every day since he died, Evelyn continued, standing in the lobby because I can't bring myself to go up to the 4th floor, can't face that room. But I couldn't stay away either, so I stand there for 30 minutes like an idiot, remembering. That's not idiotic, that's grief. It's a waste of time, of life, of everything he would have wanted for me. She turned to face Jonah fully. Your daughter's been teaching me something I forgot, that being alive means more than just not being dead. You have to actually live. That's wise for 7. She learned it from you. The way you keep showing up, keep trying, even when it's hard. That's not nothing, Mr. Miles. Before Jonah could respond, Harper came running back with her hands cupped around something. Look, a hermit crab. She opened her palms to reveal a small crab in a borrowed shell, antennae twitching. Evelyn leaned down to examine it. He's beautiful. He's looking for a new home, Harper explained. That's what hermit crabs do. When their shell gets too small, they find a bigger one. Smart creatures. Daddy says people should do that too. Find new homes when the old ones don't fit anymore. Evelyn met Jonah's eyes over Harper's head, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition that they were all hermit crabs, carrying around shells that no longer fit, looking for something better. They released the crab back into the tide pool and walked along the beach until it was time for the 4th stop. But when they got back to the car, Evelyn made another unprecedented decision. Let's skip the bank too. I don't want to move money around today. I want to... She hesitated, as if the words were foreign. I want to do something that isn't part of the routine. Like what? Jonah asked. I don't know. Something Daniel would have liked. He loved... Her voice caught. He loved bookstores. The old kind with creaky floors and dust and books piled everywhere. Jonah knew exactly where to go. The Armchair Sailor was tucked into a side street in Newport, the kind of bookstore that looked like it had been there since the Revolutionary War. Wooden floors did creak. Books were indeed piled everywhere, on shelves, tables, chairs, stacked in precarious towers that defied physics. The owner, a white-haired woman in reading glasses on a chain, looked up as they entered. Help you find anything? Just browsing, Evelyn said, and her voice had lost its hard edge. She sounded almost shy, like someone remembering how to want things. They wandered through the narrow aisles. Harper found a children's section and immediately settled in with a stack of picture books. Jonah gravitated toward the history section, and Evelyn stood in front of the fiction shelves, running her fingers along spines like she was reading Braille. He wanted to be a writer, she said softly. Jonah realized she was talking to him, or maybe to herself. Even when he was sick, he'd make up stories. about pirates and astronauts and talking animals. He filled notebooks with them. She pulled a book from the shelf, some fantasy novel with a dragon on the cover. His dream was to see his name on a book spine someday. Did you keep the notebooks? Every single one, locked in a trunk in his old room, which I haven't opened since he died. She clutched the dragon book to her chest. I couldn't bear to read them. Couldn't bear to see his handwriting and remember all the stories he'll never finish. Maybe someday you'll be ready. Maybe. She looked at the book in her hands. I'm buying this. And one for Harper. She should have books in that cottage. They left with a bag of 6 books. The Dragon Fantasy for Evelyn, 3 picture books for Harper, and 2 novels Jonah mentioned he'd been meaning to read. At the register, Evelyn paid cash from a wallet that looked expensive and unused. When was the last time you bought something just because you wanted to? Jonah asked as they walked back to the car. I don't remember. Probably before Daniel got sick. She held the bag like it contained something precious. I'd forgotten what it felt like. To want something that isn't about obligation or routine or keeping the ghosts fed. That night, Evelyn did something else unprecedented. She invited Jonah and Harper to dinner in the main house. Arthur nearly dropped his silver tray when she announced it. Dinner? In the dining room? Yes, Arthur. The room with the table and chairs where people traditionally eat meals together. But you haven't, that is, we haven't used the formal dining room since, I know, but we're using it tonight. Set 3 places. Tell cook to make something a child would actually eat. So at 7 o'clock, Jonah and Harper walked through the mansion's main doors, not as employees sneaking through the service entrance, but as guests. The dining room was overwhelming. Vaulted ceilings, oil paintings of stern ancestors, a table that could seat 20 people. Crystal chandelier throwing prismatic light across white linens. But Cook had set only one end of the table, creating an island of intimacy in the vast space. 3 places, cloth napkins, simple white plates. And the food was perfect. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls warm from the oven. Comfort food, not fancy cuisine. Evelyn appeared in the doorway wearing something that wasn't black, a navy sweater and gray slacks. It was so unexpected that Jonah actually stared. Is this all right? She asked, suddenly uncertain. I wasn't sure what one wears to informal dinner with one's driver and his daughter. You look nice, Harper said. Blue is pretty. Thank you. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, Jonah and Harper on either side. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched awkward, and Jonah realized Evelyn probably hadn't shared a meal with anyone in years. So, Evelyn said finally, Harper, tell me about school. And just like that, the ice broke. Harper talked about her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had a pet snake named Gerald, about the boy who ate paste during art class, about how recess was too short and lunch was too long, and why did they have to learn cursive when everyone used computers now? Evelyn listened with an attention Jonah recognized, the way you listened when you'd been starved for human connection, and suddenly someone was offering it freely. And you, Mr. Miles? What did you do before becoming my very patient driver? I taught middle school history, American Revolution, Civil War, World War II. Why did you stop? The question was direct but not cruel, just curious. Harper's mom got sick, cancer, stage 4 by the time they found it. I took family leave to care for her and then she died, and I couldn't... He paused, aware Harper was listening. I couldn't go back to teaching kids about history when I could barely get through each day. The school was understanding, but eventually I had to resign. That must have been impossibly hard. It was, still is some days. Evelyn looked at Harper. And you? Do you remember your mother? Harper nodded. She had curly hair like mine, and she sang all the time, even when she was really sick. Daddy would get mad because she needed to rest, but Mommy said singing made her feel alive. She sounds wonderful. She was. She made really bad pancakes, though, like really bad. They were always burned or raw in the middle. Despite the sadness of the topic, everyone laughed. And suddenly the dining room didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a room where people actually lived. They talked through dinner, through dessert, apple pie with ice cream, and into the evening. Evelyn told stories about Daniel, how he'd been obsessed with dinosaurs at age 5, How he'd insisted on wearing a cape to his first day of fourth grade. How even when he was sick, he'd made the nurses laugh. I haven't talked about him like this, Evelyn said as Arthur cleared the plates. In so long. Everyone was so uncomfortable with my grief that they stopped mentioning him, and I didn't know how to bring him up without making people sad. You can talk about him with us, Harper said. We're already sad about our own person, so it doesn't make it worse. Evelyn's eyes filled. That's very generous of you. It's not generous, it's just true. After dinner, Evelyn walked them back to the cottage. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across black sky. The ocean breathed its eternal rhythm in the darkness beyond the cliffs. At the cottage door, Evelyn hesitated. Thank you. For dinner. For listening. For... She gestured helplessly. For reminding me what it's like to sit at a table with other people. Thank you for inviting us, Jonah said. And for the books. Small payment for large lessons. She crouched down to Harper's level. You know what? Tomorrow, during our drive, I think I'd like to do something different again. Would you help me figure out what? Like what? I don't know. Something that isn't about visiting ghosts, something about being alive. Harper considered this seriously. We could go to the art museum. They have a kids' day on Fridays with workshops. Then that's what we'll do. Evelyn stood, brushing off her navy slacks. Good night, Harper. Good night, Mr. Miles. Jonah, call me Jonah. She smiled, that small, fragile expression that was becoming more frequent. Good night, Jonah. They watched her walk back through the gardens toward the main house, her form gradually disappearing into shadows. But tonight, when she entered the mansion, she turned on more than just her bedroom light. The dining room glowed, then the library. Soon the whole first floor was illuminated, pushing back against the darkness. She's waking up, Harper said. Yeah, I think she is. Inside the cottage, while Harper brushed her teeth, Jonah stood at the window and thought about change. How it happened slowly, then all at once. How you could be dead while still alive, and then something, someone, reminded you what living actually meant. His phone buzzed, a text from Arthur. Mrs. Locke just called the company lawyers. Board meeting moved to tomorrow afternoon. She's actually going to fight them about the developments. I've worked here 15 years and never seen her this alive. Whatever you and Miss Harper are doing, keep doing it. Jonah texted back. We're not doing anything special, just being honest. That's exactly what she needs. The next day, Evelyn skipped all 4 stops. Instead, they spent the morning at the art museum, where Harper dragged them both through galleries, explaining paintings with the confidence of someone who'd spent weeks studying her new art supplies. Evelyn listened, asked questions, even laughed when Harper declared a famous abstract piece looked like When Daddy Tries to Make Breakfast. Then, at 1 o'clock, Evelyn checked her watch. I have to go. The board meeting. Do you want us to wait? Jonah asked. No, take Harper for lunch, then home. I'll find my own way back. She straightened her shoulders, and Jonah saw steel returning to her spine, not the cold rigidity of grief, but strength, purpose. I have to do this alone. Good luck. Thank you. I'll need it. She walked away toward the parking lot, moving with determination Jonah hadn't seen before. Harper tugged his hand. Is she going to be okay? I don't know, baby, but at least she's fighting. They ate lunch at a diner, then returned to the estate. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. Jonah helped Harper with homework while anxiety gnawed at his gut. What if the board fired Evelyn from her own company? What if she lost everything trying to do the right thing? At 6 o'clock, they heard a car in the driveway. Not the Mercedes, a taxi. Evelyn emerged, still in her navy sweater, hair falling loose from its severe bun. She walked to the cottage instead of the main house. Jonah opened the door before she knocked. How did it go? Evelyn's smile was tired but triumphant. I won, barely, by 3 votes. But we're halting the displacement projects and creating a fund to help the families we harmed. She laughed, slightly manic. They threatened to remove me as CEO. I told them I'd liquidate my shares and tank the stock price. It was the worst negotiation of my life and the best thing I've ever done. Harper appeared behind Jonah. So you stopped the bad stuff? I stopped the bad stuff. or at least paused it long enough to figure out how to do better. Evelyn's eyes were bright, almost feverish. Do you know what I realized sitting in that boardroom, listening to men in expensive suits tell me emotion had no place in business decisions? I realized Daniel would be ashamed of the person I became after he died. He'd hate that I turned into someone who put profit over people. So now what? Jonah asked. Now I rebuild. The company, the estate, myself, all of it. She looked between them, father and daughter, both broken, both healing. And I wondered if you'd help me. We're just your driver and his kid. No. You're the people who reminded me what it means to be human. That's worth considerably more. She pulled out her phone and showed them a note. I've drafted a new mission for Locke Properties, sustainable development that prioritizes community needs over maximum profit. And I want to start here, on the estate. Open it up, make it useful. Useful how? I don't know yet, but this place has been a mausoleum long enough. It should be alive again, serving some purpose beyond housing my ghosts. She looked at Harper. You said I should decide to be different, so I'm deciding. I'm going to turn all this grief into something that actually helps people. Harper nodded solemnly. That's good. Grief should be useful, not just sad. Exactly. Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and winced. The lawyers, already questioning every decision. This is going to be exhausting. But worth it, Jonah said. But worth it, she agreed. She left them then, walking back to the main house with steady steps. And Jonah realized that in 6 weeks, everything had changed. The silent, grieving woman who'd hired him had become someone who fought back, who made hard choices, who remembered how to care about something beyond her own pain. That night, Harper asked a question that had been building. Daddy, do you think Mommy would be proud of us? Living here, helping Mrs. Locke? Jonah pulled her close. Yeah, baby. I think she'd be really proud. Me too, Harper yawned. I think Mrs. Locke's son would be proud of her too. I think you're right. As Harper drifted to sleep, Jonah sat by the window watching lights burn in the mansion. Every room on the first floor glowed now, and as he watched, the second floor lit up too. Evelyn was reclaiming her home, one room at a time. His phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Arthur. She's opening Daniel's room. First time in 15 years. Thought you should know. Jonah looked at the sleeping child beside him, at the cottage that had become their sanctuary, at the impossible Gothic mansion coming back to life. They were all waking up, all finding their way out of the sad places they'd been trapped in. And tomorrow, they'd keep going. One day, one decision, one act of living at a time. The morning after Evelyn opened Daniel's room, Jonah found her sitting on the cottage steps at dawn. She wore jeans, actual jeans, faded and soft, and one of her late husband's old sweaters, holes in the elbows. Her feet were bare despite the November cold, and she held a notebook against her chest like a shield. I couldn't sleep, she said when Jonah stepped outside with 2 mugs of coffee. Kept thinking about what I read. He sat beside her, offering 1 mug. She took it gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warmth. His notebooks? All of them. 17 notebooks filled with stories about a boy who could talk to stars, about a girl who lived in a lighthouse at the end of the world, about a dog who saved his family from a storm. Her voice cracked. Beautiful stories, unfinished stories. He had so much left to say. The sun was rising over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Waves crashed against the cliffs in their eternal rhythm, indifferent to human grief, unconcerned with loss. There's something else, Evelyn continued. The last notebook, the one he wrote in during his final weeks. She opened it, hands trembling, and showed Jonah a page filled with a child's careful handwriting. He wrote about me, about how I stopped visiting as much, how I was too busy with work, and he wrote that he understood, that he forgave me, that he hoped I'd forgive myself someday. Jonah read the passage she indicated, and his throat tightened. The words were full of grace that no 12-year-old should have to possess, forgiveness for abandonments that should never have happened. He was dying, and he was worried about me, Evelyn whispered. Just like Harper said, he spent his last energy comforting his mother who couldn't bear to watch him go. So what are you going to do about it? She looked at him, eyes red but clear. I'm going to stop wasting the life he wanted me to live. I'm going to make this estate into something he'd be proud of, something that helps kids like him, sick kids, struggling kids, kids who need a place that isn't hospitals or shelters or cars their parents are living in. That's ambitious. It's necessary. She stood, energy suddenly coursing through her like electricity. I've been thinking all night. The estate is 40 acres. The main house has 22 rooms I never use. The grounds could be gardens, play spaces, art studios. I have money sitting in accounts doing nothing but growing while families are homeless. The board will fight you. Let them. I own controlling shares. They can advise all they want, but the final decision is mine. She looked at the mansion, that Gothic monument to old wealth, and Jonah saw her expression shift from haunted to determined. I'm calling an architect today, and a lawyer, not the company ones, someone who specializes in nonprofits, and I want your opinion. My opinion? You're a father who understands what families need. You're a teacher who knows what kids respond to, and you're honest enough to tell me when I'm being an idiot. She smiled, and it was getting easier, more natural. That makes you invaluable. Before Jonah could respond, Harper appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Why are you on our steps? She asked Evelyn with the bluntness of the recently awakened. Plotting revolution, Evelyn said seriously. Want to help? Before breakfast? Especially before breakfast. All the best revolutionaries work hungry. Harper considered this, then nodded and sat down between them. What kind of revolution? The kind where we take this sad old house and make it useful. Your dad tells me you have opinions about what kids need. Kids need places that aren't scary, and food that doesn't taste like hospital, and grown-ups who don't lie about things being okay when they're not. Evelyn pulled out her phone and started typing notes. Keep going. And art supplies, and books, and maybe a dog, because dogs are good when you're sad. Noted. What else? Harper thought hard, her face scrunched in concentration. Places to hide when it's too loud. My school has a quiet room with beanbags and soft lights, and sometimes kids go there when they're having bad days. It helps. A quiet room, yes. Evelyn kept typing. Jonah? What about you? Normalcy, he said. When Emma was sick, when we were drowning in medical bills and fear, what Harper needed most was just normal things. Going to the park, reading stories before bed, routines that weren't about hospitals or dying. Evelyn's fingers flew across her screen. So, gardens, art spaces, quiet rooms, normalcy. What about the families themselves, the parents? Support, Jonah said immediately. When you're living in a car with your kid, you don't just need housing. You need someone to help you find a job, fill out assistance applications, figure out school enrollment. The system is designed to defeat you. Then we'll have caseworkers, people who actually give a damn. Evelyn looked between them, and her face was alive in a way Jonah had never seen. I want to do this right. Not just throw money at problems, but actually solve them. That's going to take time, Jonah warned. Years, probably. Good. I've wasted 15 years. I can spend the next 15 actually accomplishing something. The next weeks blurred together in a frenzy of activity. Architects arrived to assess the mansion and grounds. Lawyers drafted incorporation documents for the Locke Foundation. Contractors gave estimates for renovations. And through it all, Evelyn moved like a woman possessed, not by grief anymore, but by purpose. She hired Maria Chen, a social worker who'd spent 20 years in the Providence shelter system, to direct the foundation. Maria was 50, tiny, and took no nonsense from anyone, including billionaires. You want to help families? Maria said during her interview, sitting in the library that had been silent for 15 years and was now Grand Central Station. Then you need to understand that charity isn't enough. These people need dignity, autonomy, pathways out of poverty, not handouts, hand-ups. Agreed, Evelyn said, which is why I'm hiring you. Tell me what you need. Maria's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Just like that? Most wealthy donors want control, want their names on everything, want gratitude and photo ops. I want results. My name is already on enough buildings I'm not proud of. This time, I want to actually help people rather than displace them. What changed your mind? Evelyn glanced at Jonah and Harper, who were sitting quietly in the corner. Harper was drawing plans for a garden, tongue poking out in concentration. I remembered what it's like to be human, Evelyn said simply. Can you start Monday? Maria could. The board called emergency meetings. Investors expressed concern. The company lawyers sent increasingly frantic emails about liability and tax implications and reputation risk. Evelyn ignored them all and kept moving forward. She converted the mansion's east wing into family apartments, 5 units, each with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and private bathroom. The west wing became common spaces, a large kitchen for cooking classes, a library, an art studio, a music room with donated instruments. The grounds transformed too. Gardeners cleared decades of overgrowth, revealing stone pathways and flower beds that just needed attention. A local landscaping company donated trees and shrubs. Harper designed a children's garden with vegetables and flowers, paths wide enough for wheelchairs, benches for resting. It should feel safe, she explained to the landscaper, a woman named Rosa, who listened to Harper like she was a fellow professional. Not too open because that's scary, but not too closed because that's scary too. Like a hug, but from a garden. Rosa sketched modifications to her design. Like a hug from a garden. I can work with that. But not everyone was supportive. 2 months into the renovations, Jonah was driving Harper home from school when she said something that made his blood run cold. Tyler said Mrs. Locke is crazy, and you're taking advantage of her. Jonah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Tyler from your class? His dad works for Mrs. Locke's company. He heard his parents talking about how she's wasting money on homeless people when she should be making profit for shareholders. Harper's voice was small. Is that true? Are we taking advantage? No, baby, we're not. Then why would Tyler's dad say that? Jonah pulled over and turned to face his daughter. Because some people think money is more important than helping others. They're not bad people necessarily. They just have different priorities. Are their priorities wrong? I think so, but they'd probably say mine are wrong too. Harper processed this then. Mrs. Locke seems happy now. She didn't seem happy when we first met her. She wasn't. So even if Tyler's dad thinks she's wasting money, at least she's not sad all the time anymore. That's worth something, right? Out of the mouths of babes, Jonah thought. Yeah, sweetheart, that's worth everything. But the criticism stung, and that evening Jonah mentioned it to Evelyn during one of their increasingly frequent planning sessions in the library. People are talking, saying you've lost your mind, that we're manipulating you. Evelyn looked up from the grant application she was reviewing. Arthur had just brought tea, and she wrapped her hands around the cup, a habit she'd adopted from their coffee shop conversation months ago. Are you manipulating me? No. Then I don't care what people say. She took a sip. Do you know what Robert, my late husband, used to tell me? He said the measure of a life isn't what you accumulated, but what you gave away. I spent 15 years accumulating grief. Time to give something else away. The board might force you out. They can try, but I have controlling shares, and I've got lawyers who are meaner than theirs. She smiled, and it was almost mischievous. Besides, the publicity would be terrible. Widow honors late son's memory by helping sick children. That's good press. Company board removes grieving mother from charity work. That's a PR nightmare. You've thought this through. I've thought about little else. This is the first time in 15 years I've woken up with a reason to get out of bed. She set down her teacup. People will always criticize. The question is whether you're living for their approval or your own conscience. Maria appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. Evelyn, we got our first family. Single mother, 2 kids, ages 8 and 5, living in their car for 6 weeks. She has a job, just can't afford first month, last month, and security deposit anywhere. Can we take them? Evelyn stood. When can they move in? Tomorrow, if the apartment's ready. It's ready. Arthur, can you ensure the kitchen is stocked? Include things kids actually eat, cereal, peanut butter, fruit. She was already moving, that electric energy returning. Maria, what does the mother need? Childcare so she doesn't lose her job. The kids aren't enrolled in school yet, and probably about 17 kinds of paperwork for assistance programs. Hire a caseworker to handle the paperwork. And Harper's school has aftercare. Can we arrange enrollment? They swept out together, leaving Jonah in the library with his lukewarm tea. He heard Evelyn's voice echoing through the mansion, issuing instructions, making calls, bringing the house fully to life for the first time in 15 years. Harper appeared at his elbow. Is someone moving in? A family, mom and 2 kids. Good. This house is too big for just Mrs. Locke and Arthur and Cook. It needs more people. She was right. The mansion had been built to house dozens, servants, family, guests, and had instead become a mausoleum for 2. Now it was remembering its original purpose, to be lived in, to shelter people, to be a home rather than a monument. The Rodriguez family moved in the next day. Carmen Rodriguez was 32, exhausted, and suspicious of Charity. Her daughter Sophia was 8 and protective. Her son Miguel was 5 and never stopped moving. Evelyn met them at the door personally, which Arthur later said was unprecedented. "Welcome," Evelyn said, and Jonah could hear her forcing warmth into a voice that had forgotten how. "I'm Evelyn. This is your apartment." Carmen's eyes swept the entrance hall, the chandelier, the oil paintings, the marble floors. "This is a mistake. We can't afford this." "It's not about affording it. It's about having a safe place to live while you get back on your feet." "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just expectations that you'll work with Maria to develop a plan for long-term stability, that you'll keep the apartment clean, and that your children attend school regularly." Carmen's suspicion didn't fade. "And when you get tired of playing savior? When this charity experiment gets boring? Where do we go then?" The bluntness would have offended some benefactors. Evelyn just nodded. "Fair question. I can't guarantee forever. No one can. But I can guarantee at least a year, renewable, with 6 months' notice if anything changes. And Maria will be working with you on permanent housing options that don't depend on my whims." "Why are you doing this?" Evelyn glanced at Harper, who'd come to watch the new family arrive. "Because I spent too many years not doing anything useful. And because a very wise 7-year-old reminded me that grief should be useful, not just sad." Harper waved. Sophia, the 8-year-old, waved back cautiously. The Rodriguez family settled into the East Wing. Within days, the mansion's acoustic changed. Children's voices, laughter, arguments, the sounds of life. Miguel's toy trucks crashed through the hallways. Sophia's music played from their apartment, pop songs and Disney soundtracks. Carmen's alarm went off at 5:30 every morning as she prepared for her shift at the hospital where she worked as a nursing assistant. Harper appointed herself Sophia's unofficial tour guide, showing her the gardens, the art studio, the library where you could read anything you wanted. Sophia was wary at first, but Harper's earnest enthusiasm was hard to resist. "You live in the cottage?" Sophia asked during one of these tours. "Yeah, it's smaller, but it's nice." "Why don't you live in the big house if your dad works here?" "Because Mrs. Locke needs her space. She's been really sad for a really long time, and she's just learning how to be unsad. Too many people at once might be hard." Sophia processed this with the seriousness of someone older than 8. "My mom's been really sad too, since my dad left." "Sadness is hard," Harper agreed, "but at least we have a house now. That's better than a car." "Way better than a car." They sat on a bench in the children's garden, Harper's design come to life. Plants growing in raised beds, a small fountain trickling peacefully. "Want to help me plant bulbs?" Harper asked. "Rosa said we can put in tulips for spring." "Okay, but I don't know how." "I didn't either, before I came here. Mrs. Locke taught me. Well, Rosa taught me, but Mrs. Locke paid for everything and helped dig holes." They spent the afternoon planting bulbs that would bloom in April, red and yellow and purple, little promises of future beauty buried in cold November ground. But not everyone was adapting smoothly. 3 weeks after the Rodriguez family moved in, Jonah got a call from Harper's school. There'd been an incident. He arrived to find Harper sitting outside the principal's office, arms crossed, jaw set. Tyler, the boy who'd called Evelyn crazy, sat across from her with a bloody nose and tears streaming down his face. "He called Sophia a charity case," Harper said before Jonah could ask. "Said her mom was a leech living off Mrs. Locke's guilt money, so I punched him." Principal Morrison, a patient woman who'd dealt with Harper gently since Emma died, looked exhausted. Mr. Miles, Harper knows violence isn't acceptable. I do know, Harper said, but sometimes people need to be punched. Harper, Jonah said quietly, he was being mean, Daddy, really mean. And Sophia was crying, and no one else was doing anything. Tyler's mother, Margaret, wife of a Locke Properties executive, glared at them both. Your daughter is out of control. My son was merely stating facts about that woman's financial irresponsibility. Your son, Jonah said carefully, was bullying a child who's been homeless. That's not stating facts. That's cruelty. Cruelty? My husband works 80 hours a week for Locke Properties, and Evelyn Locke is throwing away shareholder value on vagrant families. Someone needs to say it. Maybe someone needs to say that your husband's salary comes from developments that destroyed stable neighborhoods, that the luxury condos he's so proud of displaced working families, that his precious shareholder value was built on other people's suffering. Margaret's face flushed. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you teach your child that some people are worth less because they're struggling? How dare you call a single mother working as a nursing assistant a leech when she's doing everything she can to provide for her kids? Principal Morrison held up her hands. Everyone needs to calm down. Tyler, you'll apologize to Sophia. Harper, you're suspended for the rest of the day for fighting. Both of you will have detention. And parents, she looked between Jonah and Margaret. Your children are modeling what they see at home. Remember that. Jonah took Harper home. She was silent until they reached the cottage. Then, am I in trouble? Yes. Violence isn't the answer even when someone's being cruel. But he was wrong, Daddy. Sophia's mom isn't a leech. She works really hard. I know, but punching people doesn't change their minds. It just makes them angrier. Harper's eyes filled. Then how do you make them stop being mean? It was the question Jonah had been asking himself since Emma died, since medical bills started coming, since he'd learned how quickly people judged your worth based on your bank account. I don't know, baby. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes people are determined to be cruel, and all you can do is refuse to become like them. That's not fair. No, it's really not. They sat together in the cottage while Jonah called the school to arrange for Harper's homework. When he hung up, he found Evelyn standing at the door. She must have heard everything from Maria, who'd heard from Sophia's teacher. Is she all right? Evelyn asked. Suspended for a day, she punched Tyler Wilkins. Good. Jonah blinked. Good? Tyler's father has been one of my most vocal critics. Apparently that attitude trickles down. Evelyn sat on the couch next to Harper. Violence isn't usually the answer, but I appreciate you defending Sophia. She was crying, Harper said, and Tyler was being really mean. People often are mean when they're scared. Tyler's father is scared. I'm changing things he benefited from. Tyler absorbs that fear and expresses it as cruelty. So what do? We keep being kind anyway. We keep helping people who need help. And we accept that some people will hate us for it. Evelyn touched Harper's hand gently. That's the price of trying to do better. Not everyone will understand. That evening, Carmen Rodriguez appeared at the cottage door with Sophia. Both of them looked uncomfortable. Sophia has something to say, Carmen prompted. Sophia stepped forward. Thank you for defending me, but you didn't have to get in trouble. Yes, I did, Harper said matter-of-factly. People who are mean need to know it's not okay. Still, thanks. The girls hugged awkwardly, and Carmen met Jonah's eyes over their heads. That boy's family, they called DCF, tried to report me as an unfit mother because we were living in our car. Maria handled it, got it dismissed, but it's... Her voice cracked. It's hard. Trying to rebuild your life while people actively work against you. I know, Jonah said quietly. I really do. After they left, Jonah found Evelyn still in the cottage, staring out at the garden where tulip bulbs slept underground. The Wilkins family represents about 15% of my critics, she said. Company executives who've done well under the old business model and see my changes as threats. Then there's the board members who think I'm emotionally compromised. The investors who want maximum returns. The old money families who think opening the estate to those people degrades the neighborhood. Do you regret it? Starting the foundation? No. But I won't lie and say the criticism doesn't sting. She turned from the window. I've been insulated by wealth my whole life. When Daniel was sick, I could afford experimental treatments, private rooms, the best doctors. And he still died. All that money and it couldn't save him. So now you're trying to save other people's children. Is that so wrong? No, but you can't save everyone, Evelyn. Some people will fall through the cracks no matter what you do. I know, but I can save some. Isn't some better than none? She left before Jonah could answer, walking back through the November darkness to the mansion that was no longer a mausoleum, but something alive and complicated. The criticism intensified as winter approached. A local newspaper ran an editorial questioning whether Locke Estates' transformation would impact property values. A business journal published an analysis of Locke Properties' declining profits under Evelyn's emotional leadership. Tyler's father gave an interview claiming Evelyn was having a breakdown and needed to be removed for her own well-being. Through it all, Evelyn kept moving forward. 2 more families moved into the East Wing apartments. The art studio opened with donated supplies and a teacher who volunteered 3 days a week. The gardens prepared for winter, plants tucked in, soil enriched for spring. And then, 3 days before Christmas, something happened that changed everything. Jonah was helping Harper hang lights in the cottage when Maria called. "Can you bring Evelyn to the emergency entrance of Rhode Island Hospital? It's Carmen." They drove in tense silence. At the hospital, Maria met them at the door, her face grim. Carmen had an aneurysm at work. They're doing emergency surgery now. Sophia and Miguel are in the waiting room. They were at aftercare when it happened. No other family. Evelyn went pale. What floor? 4th. The same floor where Daniel had died. Evelyn's hands started shaking. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't go up there." "You don't have to," Jonah said. "Stay here. I'll sit with the kids." But Harper pulled away from him. "No, Mrs. Locke should come. Sophia needs grown-ups who aren't going to lie and say everything's fine when it might not be." "Harper, I'm right, Daddy. You know I'm right." Evelyn stared at the elevator, that silver door leading to the 4th floor she'd avoided for 15 years. Her breathing had gone rapid, panic rising. Harper took her hand. "We'll go together. It's scary, but we'll go together." And somehow that simple statement from a 7-year-old was enough. Evelyn nodded, squeezed Harper's hand, and walked toward the elevator. The 4th floor looked nothing like Jonah expected. It had been renovated since Daniel's time. New paint, new floors, skylights that brought in natural light. But Evelyn still stopped just outside the elevator, frozen. "Which way to pediatric critical care?" she asked, voice barely audible. A nurse pointed. "Down the hall, left at the—" "I know where it is." They found Sophia and Miguel in a corner of the waiting room. Sophia was holding her brother, who was crying. When she saw Evelyn, something in her face crumpled. "They won't tell me anything. They say I'm too young." Evelyn sat down beside them. "What's your mother's full name?" "Carmen Maria Rodriguez." Evelyn pulled out her phone and made a call. Her voice shifted into the command tone she'd probably used running Locke Properties, crisp, authoritative, brooking no argument. "This is Evelyn Locke. I need to speak with the neurosurgeon treating Carmen Rodriguez immediately." "Yes, I'll wait." She covered the phone. "Sophia, I'm going to find out what's happening. I promise you, no lies, no sugarcoating, just truth. Can you handle that?" Sophia nodded, jaw tight. A voice came through the phone, and Evelyn listened intently, asking pointed questions about surgical procedures and recovery odds. When she hung up, she met Sophia's eyes. "Your mother had a brain aneurysm rupture. They're operating now to stop the bleeding and relieve pressure. The next 72 hours are critical. If she survives surgery, she has about a 60% chance of meaningful recovery." Meaningful recovery? She might have permanent damage, memory, motor skills, personality changes, or she might be completely fine. They won't know until she wakes up. "And if she doesn't survive surgery?" Evelyn didn't flinch from the question. "Then we'll make sure you and Miguel are taken care of. I promise you that." Sophia started crying, not the quiet tears of someone trying to be strong, but the desperate sobs of a child facing the possible loss of everything. Miguel joined in, and Evelyn did something Jonah had never seen. She pulled both children close and let them cry against her shoulders, while her own tears fell silently. Harper climbed onto Jonah's lap, and they waited together in that sterile room while surgeons worked to save a woman who'd been living in her car 6 weeks ago, a woman whose path had intersected with theirs through desperation and grace. 3 hours later, a surgeon emerged. "Family of Carmen Rodriguez?" They all stood. The surgeon looked confused by this group. A billionaire in designer clothes, a driver in jeans, 2 children, and a social worker. "She made it through surgery," he said, and Sophia's knees buckled. Evelyn caught her. "But the next few days will determine recovery extent. You can see her briefly, immediate family only." "I'm her daughter." "And the boy?" "Her son. He's 5. Is he allowed?" The surgeon hesitated, then nodded. "Brief visit. She's unconscious but may hear you." Sophia and Miguel disappeared through the double doors with the nurse. Maria, Jonah, Harper, and Evelyn stood in the waiting room, exhausted and wrung out. "Thank you," Maria said to Evelyn, "for coming, for handling that." "I didn't think I could come back to this floor," Evelyn admitted. 15 years of driving past this hospital, standing in the lobby, but never coming up. I thought it would destroy me. But it didn't. No. It was just a floor, sad because of memory, but just a floor. She looked at Jonah. "Grief makes everywhere a haunted house. You have to decide if you're going to live in it forever or walk back out into daylight." When Sophia and Miguel returned, they looked smaller, younger, terrified. Maria took them home with promises to return in the morning. Evelyn insisted on covering all medical expenses not handled by Carmen's insurance. The hospital, seeing dollar signs, was suddenly extremely accommodating. As they walked to the parking garage, Evelyn stopped at a window overlooking the city. Providence glittered below them, lights of homes and businesses, lives being lived in all their messy complexity. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Both of you." Jonah and Harper waited. "I've been using you. Not maliciously, but using you nonetheless. I was so broken when you arrived, and Harper especially. You reminded me what it was like to care about something other than ghosts. I hired Jonah because I was desperate, but I kept you both around because you made me remember how to be human." "That's not using us," Harper said. "That's just needing help. Everyone needs help sometimes. Even when the help comes from a 7-year-old? Especially then. Kids are good at truth." Evelyn smiled through tears. "Yes, you certainly are." They drove home in silence, arriving at the estate near midnight. The mansion glowed in the darkness, every window lit, warmth spilling onto the grounds. "It looks alive," Harper said. "It is alive," Evelyn agreed. "Finally!" But as they walked toward their separate homes, Jonah and Harper to the cottage, Evelyn to the mansion, Jonah felt the weight of what had happened. Carmen might recover. She might not. Sophia and Miguel might lose their mother the way Harper lost hers. And all the money and good intentions in the world couldn't change that fundamental truth. Sometimes grief won. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, people died and children were left behind and the world continued on, indifferent and unmoved. That night, Jonah sat with Harper until she fell asleep, then walked out into the December cold. He found Evelyn in the garden, standing among the dormant flower beds. "If Carmen dies," she said without preamble, "I'll take Sophia and Miguel. If they have no other family, I'll petition for custody. They won't go into the system." "That's a big commitment." "I know, but Daniel would have wanted it. He hated seeing kids alone." She looked at the stars scattered across the black sky. "I can't save everyone. You were right about that. But I can save these 2. Maybe that's enough. And if the board uses it against you, another example of emotional decision-making, then they can go to hell." She said it without heat, just factual. "I spent 15 years making rational, business-optimal decisions while being dead inside. I'd rather be alive and criticized than dead and approved." They stood together in the cold garden, 2 people trying to outrun their ghosts, surrounded by sleeping plants that would bloom again in spring. "Thank you," Evelyn said quietly, "for bringing Harper that first day, for agreeing to this ridiculous job, for being honest when I was being an idiot, for—" she gestured helplessly, "for everything. You're welcome. But you did the real work. All Harper and I did was show up. Sometimes showing up is everything." Carmen stabilized over the next 72 hours. On the 4th day, she woke up. Her speech was slurred, her right side weak, but she was alive and aware. Sophia and Miguel cried with relief. Evelyn arranged for the best rehabilitation specialists. Maria coordinated long-term care plans. And Jonah watched it all from the edges. This woman who'd been a ghost becoming someone fierce and determined. Someone who fought for other people's children because she couldn't fight for her own. Christmas came quietly. They celebrated in the mansion's dining room. All the families from the East Wing, Arthur and Cook and Maria, Rosa the gardener, and a few other staff who'd become part of this unlikely community. Evelyn presided over it all with something approaching joy, helping Miguel hang ornaments, listening to Sophia's worried updates about her mother, accepting Harper's handmade gift of a painting showing the mansion surrounded by gardens in full bloom. For spring, Harper explained, because everything will be beautiful then. Evelyn hung it in her bedroom, where she could see it every morning, a promise of beauty to come, gardens that would bloom again, life returning to places that had been dormant too long. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Jonah found Evelyn in Daniel's room. She'd transformed it from a shrine into a working space, his notebooks on the desk, his favorite posters on the walls, but also plans for the foundation, architectural drawings, photos of the families they were helping. He would have liked them, Evelyn said, meaning the children now living in the mansion. He always wanted siblings, used to beg for a little brother or sister. Her voice caught. I wish I'd given him that. Wish I'd given him so many things. You gave him love, that's not nothing. It wasn't enough. Love is never enough to prevent death, but it's everything that matters anyway. Evelyn looked at him, really looked, and Jonah saw recognition in her eyes, the understanding that passes between people who've both lost everything and somehow kept living anyway. Thank you, Jonah, for taking a job nobody wanted, for staying when it got strange, for being exactly what we needed. We? Harper and me. Both of us broken. Both of us learning how to heal. She smiled. Turns out the job nobody wanted was the job that saved us all. Outside Daniel's window, snow began to fall, the first of the season, soft and silent, covering the gardens in white. Somewhere in the mansion, children slept safely. Somewhere in a hospital, Carmen fought her way back to consciousness. And here in this room full of ghosts and hope, two people stood together, learning how to live again. The grief would never fully leave. That was the truth they both understood. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the point wasn't to stop grieving, but to make the grief useful, to transform it into something that helped others, to let the broken places be places where light got in. Spring will come, Evelyn said quietly, watching snow fall. The gardens will bloom, and we'll still be here, doing this work. Yes, Jonah agreed. We will. It wasn't a happy ending because endings weren't happy or sad. They were just transitions into whatever came next. But it was a beginning, which was something. It was enough. Spring came slowly to Rhode Island, hesitant at first, as if winter wasn't quite ready to release its hold. But by late March, the tulip bulbs Harper and Sophia had planted in November pushed through the thawing ground, unfurling green shoots that promised color to come. Carmen had been transferred to a rehabilitation facility in February, and the progress was slow but steady. Her speech had improved, though she still struggled with certain words. Her right side remained weak, requiring physical therapy 3 times a week. But she was alive, fighting her way back, and Sophia visited every day after school with updates that Evelyn insisted on hearing. She walked 10 steps today without the walker, Sophia announced one afternoon, bursting into the art studio where Harper was teaching a watercolor class to Miguel and 2 other children from families who'd moved into the East Wing. 10 whole steps! Evelyn, who'd been reviewing foundation budgets with Maria in the corner, looked up with a smile that came easier now. That's wonderful. Tell her I'm proud of her. You could tell her yourself. She keeps asking when you'll visit. The invitation hung in the air. Evelyn had paid for everything, surgery, specialists, rehabilitation, but hadn't actually visited Carmen in the hospital or the facility. She'd sent cards, flowers, messages through Sophia, but maintained careful distance. I don't want to intrude, Evelyn said carefully. She has enough to deal with without feeling obligated to entertain her benefactor. Sophia crossed her arms in a gesture so reminiscent of Harper that Jonah, watching from the doorway, had to smile. She doesn't think of you like that. She thinks of you as the lady who saved her kids. There's a difference. The lady who saved her kids, Evelyn repeated softly. I didn't save anyone. I just provided housing. You provided everything, Sophia corrected. When Mom had the aneurysm, you made the doctors tell me the truth. You paid for stuff insurance wouldn't cover. You let Miguel and me stay here instead of going to foster care. That's saving us. Evelyn's composure cracked slightly. She set down her tablet and crouched to Sophia's eye level. Your mother saved you by working herself to exhaustion to keep you housed and fed. I just had money sitting in accounts doing nothing. That's not heroism. That's basic decency. Can basic decency visit her in the hospital? She misses talking to grown-ups who aren't doctors. The request was impossible to refuse, and Evelyn knew it. She looked to Jonah, who nodded encouragement. All right. Tomorrow afternoon, after Sophia's visit, I'll come. Sophia's face lit up. Really? Really? But you have to prepare her. Tell her I'm awkward with people and might say the wrong thing. She already knows that. She says rich people usually are. Despite herself, Evelyn laughed. Your mother's perceptive. The next day, Jonah drove Evelyn to the rehabilitation facility. Not the Mercedes anymore, but Evelyn's personal car. A sensible Volvo she'd bought after deciding the luxury sedan was too ostentatious for daily foundation work. Harper came along, claiming she wanted to show Carmen her latest drawings, but really just wanting to be part of things. That was Harper's way now, inserting herself into moments that mattered, afraid of missing life while it was happening. Carmen's room was small but cheerful, with windows overlooking a garden and artwork from Sophia and Miguel covering every available wall. Carmen herself sat in a wheelchair by the window, dressed in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked tired and thin, but her eyes were sharp. So you're the famous Evelyn Locke, Carmen said as they entered. Her speech was slow but clear. Sophia talks about you constantly. I was starting to think you were imaginary. I'm very real, unfortunately for my board of directors. Evelyn moved into the room cautiously, like someone approaching a wild animal. How are you feeling? Like someone drilled a hole in my skull because someone did, but alive, which is more than they expected 6 weeks ago. Carmen gestured to the other chair. Sit. I don't bite. Evelyn sat, hands folded in her lap. Harper immediately went to examine the drawings on the wall, providing a buffer against awkward silence. Sophia says you've been avoiding visiting because you don't want me to feel obligated, Carmen continued. So let me be clear. I don't feel obligated. I feel grateful, which is different. You gave my kids stability when I couldn't. That's worth more than money. The money paid for the stability. No. Your decision to care paid for the stability. Rich people don't usually care. They write checks to feel good about themselves, then forget the recipients exist. Carmen's gaze was steady. You didn't forget. You came to the hospital when I was in surgery. You held my kids when they thought I was dying. Sophia told me everything. Evelyn's carefully maintained composure wavered. I did what anyone would do. Most people wouldn't. Most people would have called social services and moved on with their lives. Carmen leaned forward slightly, wincing at the effort. Why are you really doing this? The foundation, opening your house, all of it. Sophia says you lost a son, but there's more to it than that. The directness should have offended, but Evelyn responded with surprising honesty. Because I spent 15 years being dead while still alive. I built walls so high nothing could hurt me, and nothing did, but nothing could reach me either. Your daughter and this one, she gestured to Harper, who was now showing Miguel how to draw perspective, reminded me what it's like to be human. I'm doing this because the alternative is going back to being a ghost. That's honest. You asked for honesty. I did. Carmen smiled, lopsided because of lingering facial weakness. Sophia also says you're terrible at accepting gratitude, so I'll keep this brief. Thank you. For everything. For giving my kids a home when we had none. For paying for treatment I could never afford. For caring when you didn't have to. You're welcome, Evelyn said quietly. And when you're ready to leave this facility, your apartment will be waiting. Take all the time you need to heal. About that, Carmen's expression shifted, became carefully neutral. My caseworker says I should start thinking about next steps. Long-term plans suggested I might want to find somewhere more permanent than charity housing. The words hung heavy. Evelyn stiffened. Did she suggest that, or did someone pressure her to suggest it? What do you mean? I mean that certain members of my company's board have been making noise about the foundation being unsustainable, about me offering false hope to families by providing temporary housing with no exit strategy. Evelyn's voice had gone cold, that boardroom edge returning. Did someone from Locke Properties contact your caseworker? Carmen looked uncomfortable. A woman called last week, said she was from the company's legal department, asking questions about our arrangement, whether I'd signed any documents, whether I felt pressured to participate in what she called an unauthorized social experiment. Unauthorized. Evelyn laughed bitterly. It's my company, my money. Nothing about it is unauthorized. She made it sound like you were having some kind of breakdown, using vulnerable families as therapy for your grief. And what did you tell her? I told her to fuck off, which probably wasn't diplomatic. Carmen's smile was sharp. Then I told my caseworker that if anyone from Locke Properties contacted me again, I'd get a lawyer and make their lives difficult. I don't have much, but I have pride, and I'm not being used as ammunition in someone's corporate war. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the garden where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. When she spoke, her voice was soft but furious. They're going to try to remove me. The board. They're building a case that I'm emotionally unstable, making poor business decisions, putting the company at risk. They'll use the foundation as evidence, use families like yours as examples of my supposed irrationality. Can they do that? Remove you from your own company? They can try. I have controlling shares, but there are provisions for removing leadership deemed unfit. If they can convince enough shareholders that I'm having a breakdown, they might succeed. Jonah, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. Then we fight back. We show them the foundation is working, that families are being helped, that this isn't irrationality but conscience. It won't matter. Numbers don't care about conscience, and the numbers show declining profits in the short term, which is all they'll see. Evelyn stood, restless energy returning. I knew this was coming. I've been preparing for it, but I didn't expect them to weaponize the families we're helping. So what do? Carmen asked. We keep going. We don't let them intimidate us into stopping. Evelyn met Carmen's eyes. But I need to be honest with you. If they succeed in removing me, the foundation's funding could disappear. The apartments, the programs, everything. I'm trying to set up endowments that would survive my removal, but it takes time. How much time? 6 months, maybe more. Lawyers are slow. Carmen absorbed this, her expression carefully controlled. Then we hope you have 6 months. And if you don't, we figure something else out. We're good at surviving. You shouldn't have to just survive. You should be able to thrive. One step at a time. Literally, in my case. Carmen gestured to her legs, still weak from the aneurysm. Right now, I'm focused on walking. Everything else is secondary. They left shortly after, Carmen needing rest and Evelyn needing air. In the parking lot, Harper asked the question everyone was thinking. Are they really going to take away the foundation? They're going to try, Evelyn said, but trying and succeeding are different things. What can we do? Live well, show them that what we're doing matters, and hope that's enough. It wasn't a reassuring answer, but it was honest, and Harper seemed to accept it. They drove back to the estate in silence, each lost in thoughts about battles to come and the uncertain future of everything they'd built. The confrontation came 2 weeks later, during what was supposed to be a routine board meeting. Evelyn had been attending monthly meetings since starting the foundation, enduring criticism and pushback with increasingly thin patience. But this time was different. Jonah only heard about it afterward, when Evelyn returned to the estate at 9 p.m., her face pale, her hands shaking with barely controlled fury. She found him in the cottage, reviewing Harper's homework, while Harper herself was at the main house with Sophia, the two girls having become inseparable. They brought in a psychiatrist, Evelyn said without preamble. A corporate psychiatrist who's never met me, who assessed me based on reports from board members about my erratic behavior and emotional decision-making. She recommended a psychiatric evaluation and temporary removal from active leadership. Jonah set down Harper's math worksheet. Can they do that? With a two-thirds board vote, yes. They had the votes. Barely, but they had them. She paced the small living room like a caged animal. Thomas Wilkins led the charge. Tyler's father. He presented a whole case, the foundation's costs, the declining profits, my obsessive focus on charity work at the expense of company interests. He even brought up the Rodriguez family, suggesting I was inappropriately attached, using company resources for personal emotional fulfillment. That's insane. That's business. Emotions are weakness. Caring about people is irrationality. Only profit matters. Her voice was bitter. They're giving me 30 days to undergo evaluation and prove I'm mentally competent to lead, or they'll vote to remove me as CEO. And the foundation? Suspended pending review. No new families, no new programs, no new expenditures beyond existing commitments. She stopped pacing, her whole body taut with rage and grief. They're killing it, Jonah. Slowly, with procedure and protocol, but killing it nonetheless. So we fight. How? I'm one person against a board that's decided I'm crazy. You're not one person. You have Maria, who can document every success story. You have the families who've been helped. You have data showing that stable housing reduces emergency room visits, improves school attendance, increases employment stability. You have proof that what you're doing works. Evelyn sank onto the couch, exhausted. It won't matter. They don't care if it works. They care that it's expensive and doesn't generate return on investment. Then we make it generate return. We show them that helping families isn't charity. It's investment in future stability, reduced public assistance costs, stronger communities. We reframe it in language they understand. That's cynical. That's strategic. You taught me that. Sometimes you have to speak people's language to change their minds. For the first time since arriving, Evelyn smiled slightly. When did you become a strategist? When someone I care about started getting attacked for doing the right thing. The words hung between them, more significant than Jonah had intended. Evelyn met his eyes, and something passed between them. Recognition of feelings neither had acknowledged, complicated by grief and circumstance, and the fundamental strangeness of their relationship. We should keep this professional, Evelyn said quietly, given everything that's happening. We should, Jonah agreed, but I'm not going to pretend I don't care what happens to you. Caring is dangerous. It makes you vulnerable. I've been vulnerable since Emma died. I don't have the energy to pretend otherwise. Evelyn laughed softly, painfully. We're quite a pair, the grieving widow and the widower, trying to save the world while barely saving ourselves. Maybe that's exactly why we might succeed. We know what's at stake. They sat in silence for a while, the cottage warm and quiet around them. Outside, spring had fully arrived, trees budding, flowers blooming, the garden Harper and Sophia had planted coming to life exactly as promised. Finally, Evelyn stood. I need to call my lawyers. Real lawyers, not the company ones. If we're fighting, we need to fight smart. What can I do? Keep being exactly what you've been. Honest, present, unwilling to let me disappear into grief. That's more valuable than you know. She left, and Jonah sat in the quiet cottage thinking about battles and vulnerability, about caring for people when caring made you a target, about choosing to be alive even when being dead was safer. The next month was a blur of lawyers, psychiatric evaluations, and careful documentation of everything the foundation had accomplished. Maria worked around the clock gathering data, interviewing families, building a case that what they were doing wasn't emotional indulgence, but effective intervention. The psychiatrist assigned to evaluate Evelyn was Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She spent 3 sessions with Evelyn, asking questions about Daniel's death, her grief process, her motivations for starting the foundation. They want me to say you're having a breakdown, Dr. Chen said during their final session, which Evelyn recounted to Jonah later. That you're using charity as a coping mechanism, making decisions from unresolved trauma rather than sound judgment. And what do you actually think? Evelyn had asked. I think you spent 15 years in a depression so deep you couldn't see daylight. I think something, or someone, finally reached you, and you're doing what many people do when they wake up from grief, trying to make meaning from suffering. That's not mental illness. That's mental health. Will you tell them that? I'll tell them you're one of the sanest people I've evaluated, that your decision to help others isn't pathology but growth. Whether they listen is another matter. The board meeting to review Dr. Chen's findings and vote on Evelyn's status was scheduled for April 15th. The week before, Evelyn was quiet, withdrawn, cycling between determination and despair. Harper noticed. Is Mrs. Locke sad again? She's scared, Jonah explained. People are trying to take away something she built. That's not fair. No, it's not. Can we help? I don't know how, baby. But Harper, with the strange wisdom of children who face too much too soon, had an idea. She spent 3 days working on something in secret, refusing to show anyone, insisting it was a surprise. The night before the board meeting, she presented it to Evelyn in the library where they'd first met 9 months ago. It was a book, handmade, pages carefully bound with thread, filled with drawings and writing in Harper's careful script. I made this for you, Harper said. For tomorrow. Evelyn opened it slowly. The first page showed the mansion as it had been when they arrived, dark, looming, surrounded by dying gardens. The next page showed it as it was now, windows glowing, children playing in the gardens, life everywhere. Each subsequent page told a story. Sophia and Miguel arriving scared and homeless. Carmen in the hospital. Families moving into the East Wing apartments. The art studio opening, the gardens blooming. And through it all, a figure in black gradually transforming into someone wearing colors. Someone smiling, someone alive. The final page showed the mansion surrounded by gardens in full bloom, with a simple caption in Harper's handwriting. This is what love looks like when it grows. Evelyn stared at the page for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she pulled Harper into a hug that was fierce and desperate and full of things she couldn't say. Thank you, she whispered. This is perfect. Take it tomorrow so they remember why you're doing this. I will. The next morning, Evelyn dressed in her old armor, black suit, severe bun, the mask of competence she'd worn for decades. But she carried Harper's book in her briefcase, a reminder of what mattered beyond profit margins and shareholder value. Jonah drove her to the meeting, which was held at the Locke Properties headquarters in downtown Providence. Before she got out of the car, she turned to him. If this goes badly, if they remove me, the foundation will likely collapse. The families will need to be relocated. I've set up a trust that will cover 6 months of expenses. But after that, we'll figure it out. You shouldn't have to. None of you should have to. Stop catastrophizing. You're going to walk in there and remind them who actually owns this company. I'm going to try. She walked into the building with her head high, carrying Harper's book, and 15 years of grief transformed into purpose. Jonah waited in the car, watching people come and go from the gleaming office tower that represented everything Evelyn had been and was trying not to be anymore. 3 hours later, his phone rang. It's done, Evelyn said. Her voice was hoarse, exhausted. Come get me. What happened? Just come. He found her sitting on a bench outside the building, still in her suit but somehow diminished, like someone had taken something essential from her. She got in the car without speaking. Evelyn? They voted to remove me as CEO, effective immediately. Thomas Wilkins is the interim replacement. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Dr. Chen's evaluation didn't matter. The success stories didn't matter. They'd already made up their minds. I'm sorry. The foundation survives for now. The trust I set up is independent of company control. But without my influence at Locke Properties, funding will dry up eventually. We have maybe a year before we have to shut down or find alternative revenue. Then we find alternative revenue. From where? I'm about to be publicly branded as mentally unstable. No donors will touch us. Jonah drove in silence, unsure what to say that wouldn't sound like empty platitudes. They arrived back at the estate as afternoon was fading into evening. The mansion looked beautiful in the golden light, gardens blooming, children's voices drifting from the art studio. Evelyn stared at it all like someone memorizing something they were about to lose. I failed, she said quietly. I tried to do something good, and I failed. You didn't fail. You built something beautiful. If it doesn't last forever, that doesn't make it failure. Then what does it make it? It makes it human. Things don't have to be eternal to matter. She got out of the car without responding and walked toward the mansion. Jonah watched her go, this woman who'd been a ghost and become something real, now facing the possibility of losing everything she'd fought to create. Harper was waiting at the cottage when he got back. Did it go bad? Yeah, baby, it went bad. Is Mrs. Locke going to be okay? I don't know. That night, Jonah couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Evelyn, about the families who'd found refuge here, about Sophia and Miguel and Carmen, about everything that was at risk of disappearing because doing good wasn't profitable enough. At 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep and walked through the gardens. He found Evelyn there, too, sitting on the bench where Harper had planted tulips, surrounded by flowers blooming exactly as promised. Can't sleep either? He asked. Too much noise in my head. She looked up at him, and in the moonlight, her face was stripped of all pretense. I keep thinking about Daniel, about how he used to say that helping people was the most important thing, more important than money or success or what other people thought. I thought starting the foundation would honor that, would make him proud. It would. It does. How do you know? He's dead. He doesn't get to be proud of anything. I know, because Harper's the same way. She sees the world like he did, full of people who need help, full of opportunities to care. And when I do something that aligns with that, when I choose kindness over safety, I can feel Emma's presence. Not literally, but in my choices. That's how the dead stay with us, through the values they taught us while they were alive. Evelyn was crying again, silent tears that reflected moonlight. I'm so tired, Jonah. Tired of fighting, tired of grieving, tired of trying to be someone I'm not sure I know how to be. Then rest. You don't have to fight every battle today. But the foundation will still be here tomorrow. The families will still be here. Maria and I will keep things running while you catch your breath. Why are you being so kind to me? After everything, the strange job, the crying, the upheaval I've brought to your life. Because you gave Harper and me a home when we had nowhere to go. Because you reminded me what it's like to care about something beyond just surviving. Because he stopped, unsure how to finish. Because, she prompted, because I care about you. Not as my employer or some charity project, but as a person. As someone who's been through hell and came out fighting. As someone who makes me want to be better than I am. The confession hung between them in the spring darkness, more honest than wise, more vulnerable than safe. Evelyn stood, closing the distance between them. That's dangerous, Jonah. Caring about people like me. I know, but I'm tired of playing it safe, too. She kissed him then, tentative at first, then desperate, like someone drowning who'd finally found air. It was grief and hope and fear all tangled together, two broken people trying to be whole. When they pulled apart, Evelyn was trembling. This is complicated. Everything's complicated. We should be careful, for Harper's sake, if nothing else. We will be. But I'm not going to pretend this doesn't exist. They stood together in the garden while the world slept around them, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate griefs, holding on to something fragile and new and worth protecting. Tomorrow would bring more battles, lawyers and board members, and uncertain futures. But tonight, in this garden full of flowers that had bloomed despite the cold, they had this moment. And sometimes a moment was enough. Morning came too quickly, pale light filtering through the cottage windows where Jonah had finally fallen asleep around 4 a.m. He woke to find Harper already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with a determined expression that reminded him uncomfortably of Emma when she'd made up her mind about something. We need to help Mrs. Locke, Harper announced before he'd even poured coffee. Good morning to you, too. I'm serious, Daddy. Those board people took away her job because they don't understand what she's doing. Someone needs to make them understand. Jonah sat down across from his daughter, trying to shake off exhaustion and the memory of Evelyn's kiss, which felt both too real and too impossible in the harsh light of day. It's not that simple, baby. They don't care about understanding. They care about money. Then we show them how much money it saves. You said that to Mrs. Locke about emergency rooms and schools and stuff. Can't we prove it with numbers? Maria's been trying, but these people don't want to be convinced. Harper's jaw set in that stubborn line. Then we go over their heads. We tell everyone what's happening. We make it so they can't ignore us. Harper, these are powerful people, and we're people who tell the truth. Mrs. Locke said truth matters more than power, remember? Before Jonah could respond, there was a knock at the door. Arthur stood there looking more disheveled than Jonah had ever seen him. His usually perfect composure cracked. "Mr. Miles, I need your help. Mrs. Locke hasn't come out of her room since yesterday evening. She's not answering, and I'm worried." Jonah's chest tightened. He told Harper to stay put and followed Arthur across the gardens to the main house, taking the stairs 2 at a time to Evelyn's bedroom. Arthur knocked again, calling her name. Silence. "Do you have a key?" Jonah asked. "It feels intrusive." "Arthur, do you have a key?" The butler produced one with trembling hands. Jonah unlocked the door and pushed it open carefully, half afraid of what they'd find. Evelyn sat on the floor by the window, still in yesterday's suit, surrounded by Daniel's notebooks. Her hair had fallen from its bun, her makeup was smeared, and she looked like she hadn't slept at all. But she was alive, and when she looked up at them, her eyes were clear. "I've been reading his stories," she said quietly. "Every single one. And I realized something." Arthur sagged with relief against the doorframe. Jonah moved into the room slowly, the way you approach someone standing on a ledge. "What did you realize?" "That I've been doing this wrong. The foundation, all of it. I've been trying to save people the way I couldn't save Daniel, but that's not what he would have wanted." She held up one of the notebooks, pages covered in a child's careful handwriting. His last story, the one he never finished, it's about a lighthouse keeper who thinks her job is to rescue drowning sailors. But then she realizes her real job is to keep the light burning so ships don't crash in the first place. Prevention, not rescue. "I don't understand," Arthur said. "I've been so focused on emergency intervention, housing families who are already homeless, helping people in crisis. But Daniel's story is about something different, about creating systems where people don't fall through the cracks to begin with." She stood, energy returning to her exhausted frame. "I've been thinking too small." "Evelyn, you just lost your position as CEO," Jonah said carefully. "Maybe now isn't the time for grand visions. Now is exactly the time. They took away my company position, but they can't take away my money or my name or my ability to make change happen." She started pacing, that electric intensity crackling around her again. "What if instead of fighting them for control of Locke properties, I use my shares differently? I'm still the majority shareholder. I can't run the company, but I can vote on major decisions. And I can make things very uncomfortable for Thomas Wilkins if he tries to reverse everything I started." "That's a scorched earth approach," Arthur warned. "Good. I've tried playing nice. It got me removed from leadership and branded mentally unstable. Time to stop being nice and start being effective." She looked at Jonah. "You said we needed to reframe things in language they understand. I've been thinking about that all night. What if we make the foundation self-sustaining, not dependent on my donations or company goodwill, but actually profitable?" "How do you make charity profitable?" "Social enterprise. The families we house, they have skills, talents, work ethic. Carmen's a nursing assistant. The Johnsons have restaurant experience. The Patels both have computer science degrees but couldn't find work while homeless. What if we don't just house them, but employ them? Create businesses that fund the foundation while giving people meaningful work?" Jonah felt something shift in his chest, the same feeling he got when a lesson plan finally clicked, when scattered pieces suddenly formed a coherent whole. "You're talking about building an ecosystem, not just charity, but opportunity." "Exactly. A catering business run by families who need work, a tech consulting firm staffed by people rebuilding their careers, property maintenance services. We have 40 acres here that need upkeep. Instead of hiring outside contractors, we train residents and pay them fair wages." Her words came faster, ideas cascading. "It solves multiple problems at once. People get jobs and job training. The foundation generates revenue. We prove that helping people isn't just morally right, but economically sound." Arthur was nodding slowly. "It's ambitious. It would require significant startup capital." "I have startup capital. What I need is people who believe in the vision and are willing to work." She looked at Jonah. "Are you?" "I'm a driver and a former history teacher. What do I know about running social enterprises?" "You know how to show up every day and do hard things. You know how to be honest when everyone else is lying. That's more valuable than business experience." She moved to her desk and pulled out a folder. "I've been working on something, a proposal for the Locke Foundation's next phase. I need someone to help me present it, someone who can speak to what it's actually like to need help, to be on the edge of homelessness, to rebuild from nothing. You want me to tell my story? I want you to help me tell all our stories. Mine, yours, Carmen's, every family we've helped. Stories are what change minds when numbers can't. Jonah thought about Emma, about the medical bills and the eviction notice and the desperate night he'd answered a strange job posting. About Harper learning to draw again, to speak again, to be a child again. About Evelyn transformed from a ghost to a fighter. "Okay," he said, "I'm in. What do we do first?" What they did first was call an emergency meeting of everyone connected to the foundation. Maria arrived within an hour, tablet loaded with data. Carmen came from the rehabilitation facility in a wheelchair, Sophia pushing her. The other families from the East Wing gathered in the library, confused but curious. Arthur provided coffee and Cook brought pastries because even revolutions required sustenance. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, not behind her desk where she could hide, but in the open, vulnerable and visible. "You all know what happened yesterday. I was removed as CEO of Locke Properties. The board decided I was too emotional, too focused on charity, not focused enough on profit. They're probably right about the last part. I haven't been focused on profit. I've been focused on people." There were murmurs of agreement, but also worry. These families understood that their stability depended on Evelyn's wealth and influence. If she'd lost both, what happened to them? "I'm not going to lie to you," Evelyn continued. "This changes things. The foundation's current funding model isn't sustainable long term. We have about a year before we run out of money. After that, without significant changes, we'd have to close." Sophia grabbed her mother's hand. Miguel started crying quietly. The fear in the room was palpable. "But," Evelyn said, her voice strengthening, "what if we don't rely on my money? What if we build something that sustains itself? What if instead of being charity recipients, you become business partners?" She laid out the vision, the social enterprises, the employment opportunities, the model of helping people by creating systems where they could help themselves. Maria added data about similar programs that had succeeded. Jonah spoke briefly about his own experience, about how what people needed most wasn't just money, but dignity and purpose. When they finished, Carmen was the first to speak. "You're talking about giving us jobs, not handouts. I'm talking about giving you opportunities to rebuild on your terms, not mine." "What kind of jobs?" asked David Johnson, father of 3, former restaurant manager who'd lost everything in a house fire. "Whatever matches your skills and interests." "David, you have restaurant experience. What if you managed a catering operation? We could start small, local events, then expand." Priya, she looked at one of the newer residents, a woman with a computer science degree. "You could consult on tech needs for small businesses, help them optimize their systems. We'd provide the startup capital, the infrastructure, the support. You'd provide the expertise and effort." "And in return?" Priya asked, suspicious of anything that sounded too good. "Fair wages and equity in the businesses you help build. This isn't charity, it's investment. I'm betting that given real opportunities, you'll all succeed. And when you do, the profits fund the foundation, which helps more families who build more businesses, creating a cycle that sustains itself." The room erupted in conversation, excitement, skepticism, questions, possibilities. Maria was already taking notes, forming committees, organizing the chaos into action plans. Arthur looked quietly proud, like watching someone he'd cared for finally become themselves. But it was Harper who cut through the noise with a single question. "Mrs. Locke? What about the bad board people? Won't they try to stop you?" Evelyn smiled, and it was sharp and determined. "They removed me from running the company, but they can't remove me from the shareholder meetings, and I'm very much looking forward to our next one." That meeting came 3 weeks later, after Evelyn had spent every waking hour working on the foundation's restructuring. The social enterprises were forming. David's catering company had already booked its first event, Priya had 3 consulting contracts, and Carmen, now out of rehabilitation, was training residents in basic healthcare skills with plans to start a home health aid service. The Locke Properties shareholder meeting was held in the same downtown building where Evelyn had been removed as CEO. She arrived not in her old armor of severe suits and rigid control, but in a simple dress and blazer, her hair down, her face clear of the mask she'd worn for 15 years. Jonah drove her, though she'd protested she could drive herself. "I know you can," he'd said, "but you don't have to do everything alone anymore." She'd kissed him in response. They'd been doing that more often now, stealing moments in the garden or the library, learning each other slowly. Nothing had been decided about what they were or where this was going, but both had stopped pretending it wasn't happening. "Ready?" Jonah asked as they pulled up to the building. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." The meeting room was packed. Shareholders, board members, media invited by Thomas Wilkins to witness what he'd framed as a triumphant return to profitability under new leadership. Evelyn entered to stares and whispers, the woman they'd branded unstable, walking calmly to her seat. Thomas called the meeting to order, smug satisfaction radiating from him as he presented quarterly numbers showing slight profit increases since removing emotional distractions from company priorities. He glossed over the human cost: families displaced, affordable housing projects canceled, community partnerships abandoned. When he opened the floor for shareholder comments, Evelyn stood. "I'd like to present an alternative vision for Locke Properties." Thomas's smile was condescending. "Mrs. Locke, with all due respect, you're no longer in a position to direct company vision. But I am a majority shareholder, which means I have every right to speak and to vote. So I suggest you sit down and listen." The room went silent. Even Thomas, for all his bluster, couldn't deny her right to speak. Evelyn pulled out Harper's handmade book and held it up. This was made by a 7-year-old girl whose mother died of cancer, and who was 3 days from homelessness when I hired her father as my driver. She made it to remind me why the foundation matters, not for profits or shareholder value, but for the actual human beings whose lives we affect. She opened the book and passed it to the nearest shareholder. "Look at these drawings. This is the Locke estate 9 months ago. Dark, empty, a monument to grief. This is the estate now, alive with families who were homeless, children who were hungry, people who were falling through every social safety net we claim to have." The book moved through the room while Evelyn continued. "Thomas is right that charity isn't profitable, but investment in human capital is. The families housed at the foundation aren't charity cases. They're talented, hardworking people who needed temporary support. And now they're creating businesses that generate revenue while proving that social responsibility and profit aren't mutually exclusive." She presented Maria's data, employment statistics, tax revenue generated, reduced public assistance costs, improved health outcomes. Every number showed that investing in stability created returns, both social and economic. "I'm proposing that Locke Properties adopt a new mission," Evelyn said. "One that balances profit with purpose. That we commit 5% of annual profits to community development programs. That we prioritize sustainable, affordable housing in our development projects. That we measure success not just in dollars, but in lives improved." "That's naive," Thomas interrupted. "Our shareholders expect returns, not social work." "I am a shareholder, the largest one, and I expect both." She looked around the room. "I'm putting it to a vote. Those who believe companies have obligations beyond profit maximization, vote yes. Vote. Those who think profit is the only measure that matters, vote no. The majority decides." The vote took 20 minutes of chaos, shareholders conferring, calculators coming out, percentages being calculated. When the count came back, it was close. Terrifyingly close. 48% wanted Evelyn's vision. 47% wanted pure profit focus. 5% abstained. It wasn't enough. She'd lost by 1 percentage point. Thomas's smile was triumphant. "The shareholders have spoken. Locke Properties will continue under its current leadership without distractions." Evelyn stood there, absorbing defeat, and Jonah watched from the back of the room, feeling his heart break for her. She'd fought so hard, risked everything, and still lost. But then someone stood up, an elderly man in an expensive suit, one of the old money investors who'd been silent throughout. "I'd like to change my vote." Thomas's smile faltered. The vote is concluded when the secretary records it, which hasn't happened yet. I'm changing my vote to yes." "Mr. Ashford, this is highly irregular." "What's irregular is removing a visionary leader because she cares about more than your quarterly bonus, Wilkins." The old man, Ashford, looked at Evelyn. My grandfather knew your husband. They built this company on the principle that wealth carried responsibility. Robert would be ashamed of what we've become, a machine that destroys communities in pursuit of profit. If Mrs. Locke wants to return us to those principles, she has my support. 2 other shareholders stood, changing their votes, then 3 more. And suddenly the tide was turning, people remembering that companies were built by humans and affected humans, that maybe, just maybe, purpose and profit could coexist. The final count was 54 to 46 in favor of Evelyn's proposal. The room erupted. Thomas was shouting about procedure. Evelyn stood silent, tears streaming down her face. And Jonah felt something he hadn't felt since Emma died. Hope that maybe the world wasn't entirely built on cruelty, that sometimes people chose kindness when given the chance. After the meeting, after the lawyers had been consulted and the motion was formally adopted, after Thomas Wilkins had stormed out making threats about lawsuits, Evelyn found Jonah waiting by the car. "We won," she said, disbelief in her voice. "We actually won." "You won. You stood up and told the truth until people listened. I couldn't have done it without you, without Harper, without everyone at the foundation reminding me why it mattered." She leaned against the car, exhausted but alive. "This doesn't solve everything. Thomas will fight. The implementation will be complicated, but we have a chance now, a real chance to build something that matters." So what happens next? Next we go home. We tell everyone what happened, and then we keep working, one day at a time, to prove that helping people isn't weakness, but strength. They drove back to the estate through spring sunshine, trees fully green now, flowers rioting in color along the roadside. When they pulled into the driveway, they found everyone waiting, Harper and Sophia and Miguel, Maria and Arthur and Cook, Carmen in her wheelchair, all the families from the East Wing gathered on the front steps of the mansion. Harper ran to them as they got out of the car. "Did you win?" "We won," Evelyn confirmed, and the cheer that went up could probably be heard in downtown Newport. That night, they celebrated with a feast in the dining room that had been silent for 15 years and now rang with laughter and life. Cook had prepared a banquet. Arthur served with barely concealed joy. The children ran wild through the mansion, their voices echoing off vaulted ceilings that had forgotten what happiness sounded like. Jonah found Evelyn on the terrace after dinner, looking out at the ocean where the sun was setting in shades of orange and gold. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater, her hair loose, looking more at peace than he'd ever seen her. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. "I was thinking about Daniel, about how he'd love this, the house full of people, everyone happy. He always hated how quiet it was here, how serious everything felt." She smiled, though tears glittered in her eyes. "I spent 15 years turning this place into a tomb. It's nice to see it be a home again." "He'd be proud of you." "I hope so. I hope Emma would be proud of you too." Jonah moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I think she'd be happy we found each other. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me retreat into my own head. And Daniel said I needed someone who'd call me on my bullshit." Apparently they were both right. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink into the Atlantic. Behind them, through the open terrace doors, they could hear Harper teaching Miguel a song while Sophia accompanied on the piano someone had donated. Arthur's laugh drifted out, genuine and unguarded. Maria was arguing good-naturedly with Carmen about the home health business plan. "I have a question," Evelyn said. "And you can say no." "Okay. The cottage is nice, but it's small, and you and Harper have become family to me, not employees or charity cases, but actual family. The mansion has 22 rooms, most of them are empty." She turned to face him fully. "What if you moved into the main house? There's a suite in the West Wing with 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, more space than the cottage. Harper could have room for all her art supplies. You'd be closer to everything. We could—" She hesitated. "We could be a family, if you wanted." Jonah's heart hammered. "Are you asking us to move in with you? I'm asking if you'd consider making this your permanent home, not as my employee, but as—" She gestured helplessly. "I don't know exactly what, but something more than what we are now. What about Harper? This is a lot for her to process. Ask her. Let her decide, but know that I love her like she was mine. I love you both, and I'm tired of pretending that what we have is anything less than a family choosing to be together. Before Jonah could respond, Harper appeared on the terrace, Sophia right behind her. Daddy, Mrs. Locke, Sophia and I had an idea. Oh no, Evelyn said with mock dread. Your ideas are always elaborate. Not this one. We want to plant more gardens. Big ones with vegetables and stuff. And we could sell what we grow at farmers markets, and the money could help the foundation. Rosa said she'd teach us. Can we? That's actually a great idea, Evelyn said. We have the land. Why not use it productively? And Daddy, Harper continued, Sophia said there's room in the mansion for us. Like actual rooms that aren't tiny. Could we move there? I love the cottage, but I'd love being closer to everyone more. Jonah looked between his daughter and Evelyn, these two people who'd somehow become his whole world. You've been plotting. Not plotting, Harper said seriously. Planning. There's a difference. You sound like your mother. Good. Mommy was smart. She took his hand. I know you're scared of things changing again, but good changes are okay, Daddy. We don't have to stay stuck just because we were sad. Out of the mouths of babes, Jonah thought for the 1,000th time. Okay, yes, we'll move to the mansion, we'll plant gardens, we'll be a family, whatever that looks like. Harper hugged him fiercely, then ran back inside to tell Miguel the news. Sophia lingered for a moment, looking at Evelyn. My mom says you're the reason we're not homeless anymore. I just wanted to say thank you. You're welcome. But really, you're the reason I'm not a ghost anymore. So thank you back. Sophia smiled and followed Harper inside, leaving Jonah and Evelyn alone on the terrace again. So, Evelyn said, we're doing this. Apparently we are. Are you sure? It's complicated. The foundation, the company, us, nothing about this is simple. Nothing worth having ever is. He pulled her close and she came willingly, resting her head against his shoulder. We'll figure it out, one day at a time. One day at a time, she agreed. The summer passed in a blur of activity. Jonah and Harper moved into the West Wing suite, which Harper immediately transformed with her drawings and Evelyn's continued gifts of art supplies. The social enterprises flourished. David's catering business booked solid through fall. Priya's tech consulting expanded to 3 employees. Carmen's home health aid service launched with 6 trained workers. More families moved into the East Wing as apartments became available. The gardens expanded, exactly as Harper and Sophia had proposed, becoming productive sources of both food and revenue. Arthur hired additional staff from among the residents, teaching them skills and paying fair wages. Locke Properties, under pressure from Evelyn's shareholder influence and Ashford's vocal support, slowly began changing course. Not overnight, and not without resistance, but development projects started including affordable housing components. Community partnerships were restored. Thomas Wilkins resigned in August, taking a position at a company that valued profit over people, and Evelyn didn't stop him. In September, on what would have been Daniel's 27th birthday, Evelyn did something she hadn't done in 15 years. She invited everyone to the cemetery where he was buried, not to grieve in isolation, but to celebrate in community. They brought flowers and balloons and the ridiculous amount of desserts Daniel apparently loved according to Evelyn's stories. Harper and Sophia decorated his headstone with chalk drawings that would wash away in the rain, but mattered now. Miguel left a toy truck because everyone should have trucks. I used to come here every year on his birthday and feel nothing but absence, Evelyn said, standing before the grave with Jonah's hand in hers. This year, I feel him in all of you, in Harper's art and Sophia's music and every family that's found a home. He's not gone. He's just different now, part of everything good we're building. Carmen, leaning on a cane now, instead of using a wheelchair, spoke up. My abuela used to say that the dead aren't gone until we forget how they loved, so we remember by loving the way they did. Daniel loved everyone, Evelyn said, fiercely, without condition, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. She looked at Jonah. His father was the same way. They both believed the measure of a life was how many people you helped, not how much wealth you accumulated. They were right, Jonah said simply. They stayed until sunset, sharing stories of Daniel that made him real to the children who'd never met him but knew him through Evelyn's transformation. When they finally left, Evelyn placed one last flower on the grave, a sunflower, bright and hopeful. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything you taught me. I'm finally living the way you wanted me to." In October, the foundation received its first major external grant, a national organization that funded innovative approaches to homelessness and poverty. Maria's proposal, backed by their success data, had won among hundreds of applicants. The money would fund expansion to a second location, helping even more families. "We're sustainable," Maria announced at a foundation meeting. "Not just surviving on Evelyn's donations anymore, but actually sustainable. Other donors are noticing. Organizations want to partner with us. We're proving the model works." "Daniel's lighthouse," Evelyn said quietly to Jonah afterward. "We're finally keeping the light burning so ships don't crash." "You're keeping the light burning," he corrected. "This is your vision." "It's our vision, all of us. You taught me that. Nothing worth doing is ever solo work." November brought an unexpected visitor. Tyler Wilkins appeared at the estate one afternoon, driven by his mother Margaret, who looked uncomfortable and angry but present nonetheless. "Tyler has something to say," Margaret announced, her tone suggesting she disagreed with whatever was coming. Tyler, now looking smaller and younger than Jonah remembered, stood before Harper and Sophia with red eyes. "I'm sorry. For what I said about your family, Sophia, for being mean. My dad told me things about Mrs. Locke that weren't true, and I repeated them without thinking." "Where is your dad?" Sophia asked bluntly. "He got a new job in Boston. We're moving." Tyler looked at his mother. "I didn't want to move without saying sorry." Harper, showing grace that made Jonah's heart swell, held out her hand. "Apology accepted. Want to see the gardens before you go?" The three children disappeared toward the greenhouses, leaving Margaret standing awkwardly with the adults. "My husband was wrong," she said stiffly. "About you, Mrs. Locke, about what you're doing here. I didn't see it at first, but Tyler's been miserable since we pulled him from Hawthorne Elementary. He had friends there. Purpose. He keeps talking about the garden project Harper told him about the families who were helped. He made me bring him here so he could apologize." "Children often see truth more clearly than adults," Evelyn said. "Thank you for bringing him." After they left, Jonah found Evelyn in the library staring at Harper's drawing that hung above the fireplace. The mansion surrounded by blooming gardens. "Even the Wilkins family is being transformed," he said. "You've built something remarkable here." "We've built something remarkable. Stop giving me all the credit." "You're the one who had the courage to change everything. Only because you reminded me what I was changing for." She turned to face him. "I have another question. And again, you can say no. I'm starting to recognize this tone. What are you planning?" She pulled out a small box from her desk drawer and held it out to him. Inside was a simple silver ring. No diamonds, no ostentation, just clean lines and beauty. "Marry me," she said. "Not because it's conventional or expected, but because I want to build this life with you officially. I want Harper to know she's safe here forever. I want us to be a family legally as well as emotionally. I want—" Her voice broke. "I want to stop being scared that this will disappear, that happiness is temporary, that love is something I only get to have in stolen moments." Jonah's throat was tight. "That's a terrible proposal. You're supposed to get down on one knee." "I'm not good at convention. You should know that by now." "I do know it. It's one of my favorite things about you." He took the ring from the box. "Yes, obviously yes, but I have a condition." "Condition?" "Harper has to approve. We ask her together, and if she's not ready, we wait." "Deal." They found Harper in her room, drawing a mural directly on the wall that Evelyn had explicitly given her permission to cover with art. Sophia was helping, the two girls working together on a scene of the mansion and gardens, with everyone they knew scattered throughout: Arthur and Cook and Maria, Carmen and her children, David and Priya, and all the other families, Jonah and Evelyn and Harper herself. "Harper," Evelyn said, "can we talk to you for a minute?" Harper set down her paintbrush, took in their serious expressions, and immediately looked worried. "Did something bad happen?" "No, baby," Jonah said. "Something good. Maybe. We wanted to ask you something." He explained, choosing words carefully, watching Harper's face for any sign of resistance or fear. When he finished, Harper was quiet for a long moment. Sophia had tactfully left the room, giving them privacy. Would this mean you're my mom now? Harper asked Evelyn. Like, officially? If you wanted me to be. I know I'm not Emma. I could never replace her. But I love you like you're mine. And we'd live here forever? This would really be home? As long as you want it to be. Harper looked between them, her expression serious beyond her 8 years. When Mommy was dying, she made Daddy promise that he'd find someone to love again, that we wouldn't be sad forever. I was little, but I remember. Jonah's eyes filled. You never told me you remembered that. I didn't want to make you sadder, but she said it, that love doesn't run out, that having new people to love doesn't mean forgetting old people. Harper turned to Evelyn. I think Mommy would like you. You're fierce like she was, and you don't treat me like I'm broken. You're not broken. You're just learning how to carry something heavy. Exactly, Harper smiled. So yes, you should get married. And yes, you can be my mom too. I'm allowed to have 2 moms, one in heaven and one here, right? Right, Evelyn said, crying openly now. Absolutely right. Harper hugged them both, and they stood in her art-covered room while Sophia peeked back in and started crying too because emotions were contagious. And Jonah thought about Emma, about how she'd made him promise to live, to love, to not let grief consume him. He'd tried so hard to keep that promise, and now, impossibly, he'd found himself in a Gothic mansion with a daughter who painted murals and a fiancé who'd been a ghost and chose to be human again. They were married in December, in the mansion's ballroom that hadn't been used since Daniel's 12th birthday party 15 years ago. They kept it small, just the families from the foundation, Arthur and the staff, Maria, Rosa, Dr. Chen, even Mr. Ashford, who'd changed his vote and become an unlikely ally. Harper was the maid of honor, Sophia the flower girl, Miguel the ring bearer who took his job with intense seriousness. Carmen, walking now without assistance, though still with a slight limp, had helped plan everything. David's catering company provided the food. Priya set up a sound system that worked perfectly. Everyone contributed, not because they had to, but because this weird, cobbled-together family wanted to celebrate themselves. Arthur officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. We are gathered, he said in his precise British accent, to witness something I thought impossible 3 years ago, the resurrection of joy in a house that had forgotten how to laugh. Evelyn Locke was dead when Jonah and Harper Miles arrived. Not physically, but in every way that mattered, and they too were barely surviving, drowning in grief and circumstance. But somehow, through honesty and patience and the kind of grace that only comes from people who've suffered, they found each other. They reminded each other what it means to be alive. And in doing so, they created a home that has saved dozens of families and will save dozens more. That is the real miracle we're celebrating today. Not just a marriage, but the proof that broken people can heal together and, in healing, change the world. Evelyn's vows were simple. I promise to keep being honest, even when it's hard, to keep fighting for people who need help, to love Harper like my own, to remind you daily that you're not just a driver, but the person who drove me back to life itself. Jonah's were equally direct. I promise to call you on your bullshit, to support your wild plans even when they scare me, to honor Emma by living fully, not just surviving, to build this strange, beautiful family with you and trust that love doesn't run out, it multiplies. When they kissed, the ballroom erupted in cheers. Miguel shouted gross but was smiling. Harper cried happy tears while Sophia hugged her. And Arthur, proper British butler who'd maintained composure through 15 years of grief, openly wept with joy. The reception lasted until midnight, children running wild through the mansion, adults dancing to music that hadn't played in these rooms for too long. At one point, Jonah found himself dancing with Carmen, who was surprisingly graceful despite her lingering coordination issues. You know what's funny? Carmen said. 6 months ago, I was living in my car, convinced life was over. Now I'm dancing at a billionaire's wedding in a mansion I live in, running a business I own part of. It's surreal. That's one word for it. The right word is miraculous. What Evelyn's built here, what you all built, it's a miracle. She glanced over at Evelyn, who was teaching Miguel how to dance properly while he giggled. She's not broken anymore. None of us are. We're all still broken, Jonah corrected gently. But we're broken together, which makes it bearable. Broken together, Carmen repeated. I like that. As the party wound down and families returned to their apartments, Jonah and Evelyn stood on the same terrace where he'd proposed months ago. Snow was falling softly, covering the gardens in white, making everything look new and clean and possible. I keep expecting to wake up, Evelyn said, to find that this was all a dream, that I'm still that ghost standing in the hospital lobby too scared to go to the fourth floor. It's not a dream. It feels like one. The good kind. She leaned against him and they watched snow fall on gardens that would bloom again in spring. Thank you for taking a job nobody wanted. Thank you for offering it. Think we'll be okay, long term? I think we'll have hard days and good days, fights and reconciliations, moments of doubt and moments of certainty. I think Harper will grow up, more families will need help, the foundation will face challenges, and we'll have to keep fighting for what we believe in. He turned her to face him. But yes, we'll be okay. Better than okay. Promise? I promise. They stayed there until the cold drove them inside, to the mansion that was no longer a Gothic monument to grief, but a home filled with people learning how to live again. Harper was asleep in her room, Sophia curled up beside her after the sleepover they'd negotiated. Arthur was coordinating cleanup with his usual efficiency. Maria was already planning the foundation's next expansion. The house hummed with life and possibility. In the morning, they'd wake to snow-covered gardens. In the spring, those gardens would bloom again. Families would come and go, some finding permanent stability, others needing time to heal. The foundation would grow or struggle, adapt or evolve. Evelyn would continue fighting her board, Jonah would continue teaching history to anyone who'd listen, and Harper would continue growing into a young woman who'd learned that grief and joy could coexist, that broken places could become beautiful, that families were built through choice as much as blood. But tonight, in this mansion that had been dead and was now alive, they were simply home, together. A father and daughter who'd faced eviction. A widow who'd been a ghost. An unlikely family formed from desperation and grace. The job nobody wanted had given them everything they needed, not just housing or money or stability, but the chance to remember what it meant to be human, to care about people, to fight for things that mattered, to transform grief into purpose and purpose into love. Outside, snow continued falling on the estate where tulips slept underground, waiting for spring. Inside, in rooms that had been empty for 15 years, children dreamed and adults rested, and the future unfolded one quiet moment at a time. They had survived. More than that, they had chosen to live. And in the end, that choice made all the difference.